Chapter 310. In a courtyard not far from the main courtyard, Junko and Kobayashi were also looking up at the distant fire in the capital. Under the night sky, it seemed that the place had become red. Kobayashi, you once stayed with Imperial Father for a period of time and heard some teachers talk about the power of cannons. In your opinion, is what they said credible? Junko's face was very calm, but only she knew how excited and even a little scared she was at this moment. No, I've heard that the great Ming dynasty has cannons, but I heard that it's just a line. How could it cause such a big movement? Kobayashi shook his head, his face full of shock. It could be seen that at this moment he was more or less scared. What a pity. Junko shook her head, helplessly. It's a pity that he didn't let us go to the scene in person. We can only wait for the other students to come back and inquire about it. But in the end, we heard it from others, so it's not that real. Yang Qindong didn't allow the girls to go to the scene to observe, which naturally made Junko dissatisfied. But she also knew that since it was his order, there was no reason to not carry it out. He had always been a man of his word, and this was one of the deepest impressions Yang Qindong left on Junko. The people in the manor were guessing the situation outside, and just a few hundred meters away from them, at the entrance of the manor, the two sides were confronting each other. Qi Lu instigated everyone, wanting to use the human wave tactic to fight, but the result was obvious. After a burst of gunfire, there were less than 5 people left standing on the battlefield, and Master Qi Lu was one of them. He was worthy of being the third brother of the Blackwater gang, and his ability to protect himself on the battlefield was not bad. Just like just now, he always tried to hide behind others on the way, so that the people in front of him fell one by one, and he was the last one to stand. The reason why he was able to stand until now was not because the Cold Front's marksmanship was not good, or because they lost their aim, but because Wu Sheng gave the order to stop shooting. Yang Qindong had said more than once that if you have a gun, don't use a knife, and if you can kill from a distance, don't fight in close range. However, when there were only 5 opponents left, Wu Sheng still decided to use close combat to win. He knew that Yang Wu was injured, and he recognized that one of the 5 people was the one who had injured Yang Wu. Since that was the case, it was time for an eye for an eye. Since they dared to hurt the people around the young master, it would not be easy even if they wanted to die. You are Qi Lu. He placed the Type 95 class machine gun in the hands of a lung foam. Wu Sheng said as he walked towards the center of the battlefield with a tri-edge army knife in his hand. I am Third Master Qi. Who are you? Seeing that the other party was no longer shooting and was about to engage in close combat, a glimmer of hope appeared in his lifeless eyes. He was even considering if he could take the person down and use him as a hostage. Even if he couldn't kill his way into the Yang village, he could at least leave safely. What are you thinking? Are you thinking of taking me as a hostage? Wu Sheng chuckled when he saw that Qi Lu's eyes were rolling nonstop. Then he pointed out the other party's thoughts with a single sentence. Huh. Suddenly being pointed out, Qi Lu's expression changed. When he noticed that the other party was less than 5 steps away from him, he suddenly shouted and then slashed forward with the ghost head blade in his hand. This style of Qi Lu's was wide open so that he could get close to the opponent. Only then could he get close to the opponent and make the gunman hesitate and not dare to shoot. Regarding Qi Lu's sudden approach, Wu Sheng was not surprised at all. On the contrary, he was a little excited. The tri-edge army knife in his hand was a godly weapon for close combat. If the distance was too far, it would not be of much use. His opponent's actions were exactly what Wu Sheng wanted. However, he didn't show any signs of excitement. On the contrary, when the ghost head blade approached him, his feet began to continuously retreat, giving off the feeling that he didn't want to engage in close combat. However, his body retreated and did not advance as quickly. In just 2 breaths, the distance between the two was instantly shortened. The original distance of 5 steps became less than 3 steps. As the two sides got closer, Qi Lu's eyes flashed with excitement. He seemed to have seen the hope of survival. Then, just as the excitement flashed, the figure in front of him, who was constantly retreating, suddenly stopped. Not only that, but the figure actually moved forward. The sudden change greatly exceeded Qi Lu's expectations. His instincts told him that he was in danger. The ghost head blade in his hand instinctively shrunk back. However, Wu Sheng's movements were simply too fast. In addition to the fact that he did the opposite, Qi Lu felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. Following that, it was as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out in an instant. He couldn't even pull back his saber. He could only watch helplessly as the heavy saber fell from his hand and fell to the ground. That feeling of weakness continued to hit him. His body continuously moved, and with a plop, Qi Lu fell to the ground. The moment he fell to the ground, he saw that there was a bloody hole in his waist. Blood was gushing out like a fountain, and it couldn't be stopped. Just a moment ago, Wu Sheng first acted weak, indicating that he did not want to let the opponent get close to him. Then he suddenly retreated in order to advance. Following that, the tri-edge army knife in his hand pierced his waist with lightning speed, causing him a heavy injury. There was no need to mention the might of the tri-edge army knife. After a successful strike, no opponent could withstand it. Qi Lu was the same. Looking at the bloody hole in his body, he knew that he would not be able to survive. This was the result of his carelessness. Qi Lu finally understood that the people in front of him were not only powerful long-range firearms, they were also skilled in close combat. This time he did not die in vain. At the same time that Qi Lu fell, a few other cold vanguard squad leaders rushed out from the group. Each of them held a tri-edge army knife and rushed towards the 4 lucky people in black standing in the middle of the field. This was a very good opportunity for close combat. Obviously, no one wanted to miss it. It was precisely because everyone had such thoughts that the 4 black-clothed men each faced opponents that were twice or even 3 times their number. Their courage had already been shattered, and they could not even use half of their usual strength. Facing such an elite Lung Feng, the result was obvious. After just a dozen breaths, not a single black-clothed man was able to stand unscathed. Clean up the battlefield. Also, ask 5th brother to come out. Wu Sheng said with a red face after injuring Qi Lu in one move. As for Qi Lu, who was still bleeding on the ground, he wasn't dead yet, but the feeling was far more terrifying than death. He finally understood why the other party didn't use the gun to finish him off. It turned out that the other party wanted to torture him, to watch him slowly die from excessive blood loss. The scene of flames soaring into the sky was not only seen by the people in Yangjia village. Even Wu Yong, who was leading people to ambush the Duke of Loyalty, saw it. After determining the direction, Wu Yong's heart sank when he confirmed that the source of the flames was Black Well Street. He had calculated everything, but he did not think that the Duke of Loyalty would have such powerful cannons. Moreover, they had ignored the fact that Black Well Street was located in the capital and fired without hesitation. Compared to other people, Wu Yong's thoughts were more meticulous. This allowed him to understand Yang Qindong's past even more clearly. It was because of this that he knew how this person had intimidated the Walla's leader, Yes Hen, and made him withdraw his troops and return more than 70,000 captives. This was the first time the words cannons had appeared in his mind. It also made him wonder if the Duke of Loyalty would use cannons to attack Black Well Street. However, this thought only flashed through his mind for a moment, not for anything else. Because Black Well Street was located in the capital, no matter how bold the Duke of Loyalty was, he would not dare to use such powerful cannons. On this point, Shi Tao, who had been sent by Ming, confirmed that the great Ming dynasty did not find any cannons left behind by the mercenaries. Seeing all these signs, Wu Yong was finally relieved. He waited here with peace of mind, waiting for the rabbit to appear. But he never thought that the cannons would really appear. Thinking that even Yes Hen was so afraid, Black Well Street would have been in a sea of fire. Praying that his elder brother, Hu Huaihai, would be fine, Wu Yong was even more determined to wait here for Yang Qindong. Not for anything else. This person was so bold to use the cannons. He was probably proud of himself now. In this way, the defense would be relaxed, and it would be a good time for him to attack. Wu Yong even thought that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and he had to seize it. But he did not know that compared to playing tactics, Yang Qindong, who had lived for hundreds of years in the future, had seen and heard far more than him. Just like now, when Wu Yong was ambushing Yang Qindong 5 miles outside the city gate, Tai Hu of the Langia Special Forces was also leading his team members here. Since he had decided to attack the Blackwater gang, of course, he had to be more careful and more prepared. Therefore, Yang Qindong had been thinking about what preparations he would make if he was the opponent. Obviously, he couldn't forget to ambush them halfway. Thus, he left this matter to Tai Hu. Even in the cold front, Tai Hu was an elite existence. Tai Hu, who had accepted the task, first began to search the city. After all, from the Yongding Gate to Blackwell Street, one had to pass through many streets. If it was an assassin, hiding there was obviously the safest and most hidden. With this thought in mind, Tai Hu began to search after Yang Qindong entered the city. Unfortunately, he did not find anything. Even when he reached the city gate, he still did not see any danger. Chapter 311. If it was someone else, they would consider canceling the operation. But Tai Hu had always been a serious person. Since the young master said that there might be an ambush on the way back, how could he be careless? He immediately led a group of people out of the city and continued to investigate in the direction of Yangjia village. Under his perseverance, Iron Tiger and Wu Yong finally met. The first to discover was the hidden scout sent by Wu Yong, although the other party had hidden very well. But in the eyes of Langya, this kind of concealment technique was child's play. But the scout that was sent out did have some ability. He actually let out a cry before he died. In the dark night, the sudden cry finally attracted Wu Yong's attention. Instinctively, he felt that something was wrong and ran away. Before some of his brothers could react, Tai Hu and his men appeared like divine soldiers descending from the sky. Then, a series of gunshots rang out. Although the people who stayed here to ambush were skilled, but facing the equally skilled Langya who had better weapons and equipment, it seemed that they would be at a disadvantage. The tri-edge army knife could not only cause a wound that was difficult to heal, but it was also powerful because of the hardness of its material. When the user was strong enough and the battle between the two sides started with an explosive battle, it could easily break ordinary weapons like swords, spears, swords, halberds, and so on. Imagine, after a confrontation, one side's weapon broke into two. What kind of consequences would that cause? Wu Yong's advantage in terms of weapons and his sudden appearance caught the other party off guard. Even though there were quite a number of world of martial arts experts in Wu Yong's group and their attacks were ruthless, they still began to suffer casualties after a few exchanges. Screams could be heard, and from those screams, Wu Yong could roughly distinguish who was injured, fell into a trap, and suffered losses. As for someone finding him, to be honest, Wu Yong had thought about this before, but it was just a fleeting thought in his mind. He had investigated Yang Qindong. Although this person's methods were powerful, but he also had a big shortcoming, and that was that there were too few people he could use. Although this time the Supreme Court and the soldiers of the 5 cities military office would assist him. But what could they do to the Blackwell General? What could they do to the Blackwater gang? That would truly be a joke. At the end of the day, if they were to really fight, the most mysterious mercenary group would probably be the ones to lead the Duke of Loyalty. Since that was the case, excluding the people in the manor who were attacking and defending, there should not be many people left. How could they be a threat to him? It was precisely because he had underestimated them that he felt helpless when facing the sudden appearance of the wolf fangs. But no matter what, Wu Yong was able to become the sect's second in command and was given the title of military advisor. His mind was still very quick. Let's go. Without the slightest hesitation, After Wu Yong shouted this sentence, he had already brought a few of his trusted aides and quickly retreated. That kind of decisiveness made it seem as if he did not hear the screams of his brothers behind him from time to time. At this moment, what they had said when they were together, they would share blessings and hardships together, was so laughable and childish. Since it was an ambush, once it was discovered, the meaning would naturally change. Since there was no chance left, what were they waiting for? Wu Yong left, but he only brought 4 or 5 of his brothers with him. Without the slightest hesitation, Tai, who lost track of the other party after killing 4 of the bandits, looking at the empty ambush ground, all he could do was to sigh and say, "You guys ran fast." He ended this round of slaughter. It was not accurate to say that it was a slaughter because in this battle, 4 of the Wolf Fang's brothers were actually injured. One of the injuries was quite serious. Although it was not life-threatening, he would not be able to get out of bed for at least a month. This result naturally caused the captain, Tai Hu, to be dissatisfied. However, he also knew that although the Wolf Fangs were the elites of the elites, the strength of the opponents this time was not weak. Moreover, the number of people was several times their own. In addition, they had more training than actual combat, so the opportunity to face off with a blade like this was still too little. But fortunately, as long as no one died, after experiencing today's events, presumably once they recovered and returned, their strength should be on another level. The Wolf Fangs were unprepared, but still suffered some injuries. It was conceivable that if they suddenly appeared, it might really threaten Yang Qindong's life. Speaking of Yang Qindong at this moment, he was standing on Heijing Street, commanding the bailiffs, constables, and soldiers of the 5 cities' warden office to clean up the battlefield. They originally thought that this would be a bloody battle. Whether it was the Supreme Court or the 5 cities' warden office, the soldiers who participated in this operation were all nervous. Although they knew that the leader this time was the military god, when they thought of the various deeds of the Blackwater gang, it was impossible to say that they were not at all afraid in their hearts. As a martial artist, fame was originally obtained by risking one's life. If one wanted to climb up, it was impossible to not pay a price and even not take risks. Therefore, some people who thought that they had some skills thought that this might be a good opportunity for them to perform. No matter what kind of mentality they had, what they did not expect was that, in the end, Yang Qindong would use this method to solve the problem. The roar of the cannons shook the sky, and the entire Heijing Street fell into a vast sea of fire. It was a completely one-sided attack. What originally seemed to be a very difficult thing was done so easily, which shocked everyone and made them speechless. This was an open scheme. It was an open and above-board method of attack. In this way, the problem was solved and the bystanders had nothing to say. Not only were the bystanders speechless, even the students of the Yang Academy who came to observe this time were dumbfounded at this moment, and their jaws dropped in shock. Before the fight started, some of the students wanted to show off their martial arts skills and test their skills in martial arts that they had learned during this period of time in the academy. The headmaster said that practice was the only standard to test the truth. They were looking forward to a good test. Although they were excited, they were also a little nervous. For example, they knew about the chaos in Heijing Street and that the Blackwater gang was made up of desperados. Once they fought, there was a possibility of injury or even death at any time. However, out of trust in the headmaster, Yang Qindong asked them to come, so he should be prepared. But they never thought that it would be such a preparation. They were simply here to watch a show, and there was no chance for them to do anything. It was not accurate to say that they were here to watch a show. Just as the soldiers of the Supreme Court and the 5 cities' military office began to clean up the battlefield after the bombardment, they also moved. This was also the headmaster's order. He gave each of them a sharp knife and asked them to go in and see if there was anyone who was not completely dead. When the time came, they just needed to finish the job. As for the people who could live here, Yang Qindong had no mercy at all. Killing was killing. There was no need for a trial at all. Every student was followed by one of Lung Feng's brothers. This was also a way to ensure that nothing would go wrong. These people had been learning from him for a few months, and they were all outstanding people in all aspects. It would be a pity if they were killed like this. With the cannons that were so many years ahead of this era, there were too few people who could survive. Of course, there were a few lucky ones. Because they were standing in different positions at the time, they were not immediately killed by the cannons, but they were basically seriously injured. When the cleaning up battle began, these so-called lucky ones could announce the end of their lives. The cleaning of the battlefield was very fast. The sky had just brightened, and in just 2 hours, everything was over. They also found a few secret passages, and in one of them, they found the body of the Black Water Gang's boss, Hu Huaihai. Even when this person died, his eyes were not closed. Instead, his eyes were wide open like copper bells, as if expressing the shock and indignation in his heart. With Hu Huaihai dead, the Black Water Gang was like a dragon without a leader. In a way, it could be said that the Black Water Gang was completely destroyed. Next, there were some small fries who were lucky enough to survive, but it would be difficult for them to cause any trouble. At this point, this battle could be said to have reached a perfect conclusion. The only fly in the ointment was that Wu Yong ran away. Just a moment ago, 2 pieces of information from the Intelligence Bureau were sent over. One was that Qi Lu brought people to attack the Yang village, but failed. They were completely wiped out by Wu Sheng, who was waiting for him there. The other was about Wolf's Fong. According to the previous arrangement, they searched all the way and really found the ambushers. They killed most of them, but the second-in-command, Wu Yong, who is known as the Star of Wisdom, ran away. There was a fish that escaped the net. Yang Qindong, finally, felt a trace of imperfection. But considering that the Black Water Gang on Blackwell Street had been destroyed, it was not a big deal that one person escaped. While ordering the Security Bureau to continue to track the whereabouts of this person, he turned his gaze to other directions. This time, he used the mysterious cannons to cleanly solve the problem of the Black Water Gang. It was satisfying, and presumably, it would also frighten some people. Next, they would definitely have some reaction, but he did not know what they would do. In the throne room, the court meeting was going on as scheduled. Compared to the past, many of the officials' expressions were slightly more serious. Last night, the rumbling sound of the cannons was like an earth dragon turning over, and no one could ignore it. In the morning, many of the courtiers found out what had happened. Some of the bolder courtiers even took a detour to Blackwell Street. What they saw was a messy and chaotic scene. Yesterday, it was still a strategically advantageous situation, but today, it had become a scorched earth. Occasionally, some places were still smoking after the fire. This scene was deeply imprinted in their minds, making them feel the horror of the Duke of Loyalty again. Chapter 312. Influenced by Confucianism, the Ming dynasty emphasized that the scholar officials and the emperor ruled the world together. Therefore, it is inconceivable now that the position of the scholar is so high. The status of scholars was very high, so there were even more people who flocked to them. Talents emerged in an endless stream, and there was a situation where one person appeared after another. It was precisely because of this that no one could stand high and mighty forever, and no one could fight against everyone with their own strength. But now there was a Duke of Loyalty. He could make clouds and rain with a flip of his hand, and he did not put everyone in his eyes. He paid attention to doing things his own way, and he was supported by powerful financial resources and military force. His existence naturally became an alternative, a force that opposed Confucianism and the imperial power. Yang Qindong alone occupied one side of the 3-legged tripod. This kind of oppression made many people feel very uncomfortable. Everyone had always paid attention to the fact that they were all high and mighty, but they were all controlled by others. Only in this way could there be a balance, and everyone could live a good life. And if anyone violated the rules of the game, even the current emperor could be overthrown. At worst, they could find a suitable and obedient person who knew when to advance and retreat to be a substitute. It was like Zhu Qijin had an accident, and Zhu Qiyu had quickly replaced him. Even the emperor could be replaced. This was where the scholar officials' confidence came from. This was also the reason why civil officials were higher than military officials. However, the appearance of Yang Qindong broke all these rules. It could be imagined how many people were dissatisfied and voicing their opinions. It happened so suddenly that no one showed it in today's court meeting. Everyone seemed to be thinking about how to unite to suppress this new Duke of Loyalty after going back. But before these people could do anything, the military commander-in-chief among the officials, Marquis Wukinghao Shiheng, suddenly walked out of the crowd and said loudly, "Your Majesty, the new army has been recruited and arranged into an army in order to increase their combat strength. This subject suggests that they be swapped with the soldiers of the Datong Manor, Kaiping Guard, and Guangping Guard. This way, they will be able to show their loyalty to the emperor by guarding the borders. At the same time, they can also be trained to become qualified soldiers in the shortest amount of time." I second that. Ming, the Minister of War, stood out and echoed Shiheng's words. The sudden words of the two second-rank officials, one civil and one military, immediately caused the officials to whisper to each other. As long as one wasn't a fool, anyone could see that this had been planned long ago, and had even been tacitly approved by the emperor. When they thought about what had happened in the early hours of the morning, everyone was suddenly enlightened. The so-called changing of the guard, transferring the army guarding the border to the capital, was probably the emperor's counterattack against the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. As foreign soldiers, they were naturally much more obedient than the native soldiers of the capital. Their lack of roots made them even more loyal to the emperor and easier to use. Of course, the important thing was that they were rather unfamiliar with the name of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. They were far less inclined to believe in the Duke of Loyalty and Courage than the able-bodied men of the capital. If they were replaced with soldiers, the war god's influence in the army would be greatly reduced. In this way, the emperor would have a much better chance of success if he wanted to make a move. Some of the officials couldn't help but shift their expressions. Was the emperor really planning to move against the Duke of Loyalty and Courage? If this had happened a few days ago, even if Zhu Qiyu had wanted to move against Yang Qindong, some of the officials would have tried to persuade him against it. After all, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage was a meritorious subject, and he could not be lightly moved without a good reason. At the same time, this was also for himself. Once he made a great contribution, what use would there be for others to move against him? But what had just happened showed just how frightening Yang Qindong was. In the face of such a subject, there was no master who would not feel threatened. Thus, it would not be excessive to think of ways to strike and even eradicate him. In the crowd, even the Minister of Rights, Hu Chang, and the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, had furrowed their brows for a moment, but they quickly regained their calm and composed expressions. It was true that Yang Qindong's actions had shocked everyone, and it was also true that even the emperor had been shaken. But the two of them did not believe that they would move against this person right now. It was said that the bow should be put away after the birds had flown, but the problem was that this was not the time yet. Whether it was Zhu Qijin's regime in the south or the Walla in the north, they had not yet been dealt with. If they moved against Yang Qindong now, no one knew what kind of ripple it would cause. No matter how dissatisfied Zhu Qiyu was, he did not dare to move recklessly at this moment, for no other reason than the fact that he could not bear the consequences. Without Yang Qindong, the Ying sect in the south could attack at any time, and there would be no buffer between the brothers. Without Yang Qindong, the Walla in the north could attack once more, and his current strength would not be enough to stop them. Just these two conditions alone were enough. Zhu Qiyu probably also saw this point, so he only made adjustments to the troops. This was also a disguised warning to Yang Qindong that he should not go too far. Otherwise, the Ming army, which had no influence on him, could attack him. Although both sides might suffer losses, no one would be willing to bear such an outcome. Speaking of which, this was just a way to check and balance each other. Since the emperor had done this, it proved that he had no intention of falling out with him, and there would not be any danger. Hu Chang was Hu Yan's grandfather, and now that he had a marriage alliance with the Yang family, if something happened, he would not be able to escape responsibility. Wang Ji was Wang Xi's grandfather, and his favorite grandson was studying in the Yang Qindong Academy. He had become one of Yang Qindong's students, and it was said that he was a very important student. In this way, with the title of master and disciple, many benefits were naturally tied together. The tie between benefits and family made it impossible for the two ministers to ignore everything that had happened. They even wondered if they should persuade Yang Qindong to keep a low profile. Of course, the most important thing was, what did the youngest and most daring Duke of Loyalty want to do? What did he want? In the court, with the advice of a governor and a minister, and the emperor's permission, the matter of transferring troops was quickly settled. Next, it would probably be to use money and manpower to do things. It seemed that the way of war was an important matter for the country. But because of the bombardment on Blackwell Street last night, it seemed that everyone was unable to concentrate. So no one really took the matter of the Ministry of War to heart. Of course, it was not that they did not take it to heart, but that they could not concentrate. But there were still some people who thought too much, such as Hu Chang, Wang Ji, and the newly appointed left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Su Yozhen. Nothing that happened in the court could be kept a secret. Often, when the higher-ups just made a policy, the people below would soon know about it. Perhaps this was one of the characteristics of the court. Yang Qindong learned about this matter not long after the morning court. At this moment, he was standing at the place where Wu Yong had ambushed him. The captain of Langya, Tai Hu, was very sensible. He even caught two people alive. He managed to pry Wu Yong's name and identity out of their mouths. Wu Yong? Shuebu Liangshan? When he heard this name, Yang Qindong's face flashed with an indifferent smile. Then he threw this name aside, arranged for the security bureau to do their best to investigate this person and arrest him. After saying this, Yang Qindong returned to the luxurious and comfortable carriage. As soon as he got into the carriage, he closed his eyes and rested. He did not sleep last night. This way of closing his eyes was just another way of resting. In his previous life, in order to complete a task, it was normal for him to not sleep for several days and nights. But closing his eyes now was just a kind of nap. In truth, he was thinking more about the matter of changing the guard. He had defeated Walla, become the war god, and rescued 70,000 captives. Yang Qindong held an extremely important position in the hearts of the Ming army. This could be seen from the fact that every time Yang Qindong entered the city, any soldier who saw him would stand at a distance and bow. It was precisely because of this that the matter of changing the guard had occurred. Shi Heng had even intentionally captured many able-bodied men from the capital, breaking up many families for this purpose. At the time, Yang Qindong had wondered if there was a need to do all this just to gather enough soldiers. But now he completely understood that this was not because there were not enough soldiers. It was clearly to weaken his influence and even divert the disaster away from him. After all, he was a near-legendary existence in the capital, and the immortal abode had the daily spectacle of the war god defeating Walla. With word of mouth spreading the news, it was not a problem for everyone to know about this matter. It was precisely because his influence in the capital was so great that this matter of forcefully recruiting soldiers had occurred. Don't you all worship the war god? Very good. Then I'll capture all of you and send you to the border. Let's see how your war god will save you. This was a method of removing the firewood from under the cauldron. By doing this, not only would it weaken Yang Qindong's influence in the capital, if someone were to guide him, they would even blame this terrible situation on Yang Qindong. One could even say that if not for this person, no one would have been forced to join the army and they would not have had to leave the capital. If Yang Qindong's predictions were correct, this sort of manipulation of public opinion would be detrimental to him. If he didn't even have this sort of method, Neither Shiheng nor Ming would be able to gain the emperor's favor. But these were just minor tricks. Putting aside the fact that they might not be able to affect Yang Qindong, this method was wrong in the first place. From start to finish, his goal had not been to expand his influence from the capital, but to encircle the cities from the countryside. Chapter 3:13. It was the countryside surrounding the city. Yang Qindong's intention was to establish himself in the capital and make a name for himself. Then he would establish enough deterrence so that no one would dare to look down on him and make trouble for him. It seemed that he had done enough of these things. Whether it was defeating the Walla army, beating up the Japanese envoy, or bombarding Haging Street, no one would dare to try anything behind his back. Since it was stable, then what he had done was more or less done. If he were a little more forceful, he would have to confront the imperial power, and the consequences would be unpredictable. At the very least, Yang Qindong, who lacked military power and influence, had not thought about what to do in the capital. In the society of the time, news spread very slowly. The Ming dynasty was still very powerful, and the imperial power still had a deep influence. Changing all of this was not something that could be done in a single day. It was said that heroes were born in troubled times. In the face of the great Ming dynasty, which was not in chaos, many people would find it difficult to do much even if they had all the strength in their bodies. Logically speaking, Yang Qindong could have become a wealthy man in a peaceful world. With his ability and influence, he was completely capable of doing this. After all, no one could hold such an important position in the hearts of both Zhu Qiyu and Qizhen. But since he had come to this world and knew what would happen in the future, Yang Qindong did not want to see his descendants being bullied and trampled on by foreigners. He wanted the health of his descendants, the moment when the Han people reached the apex of the world. With such a grand dream, how difficult would it be to put it into practice? In the future, even if one was rich enough to rival an entire country, it would still be impossible to achieve this goal. With the development of communications and the binding of interests, every action of any country was equivalent to living under a magnifying glass. If any country wanted to do something out of line, they would become the enemy of the world. Any country that was too strong could be labeled as a hegemon. But this was not the case now. With the lack of information, there were even cases where people did not know of each other's existence. Even if they did know, it was very difficult to understand the situation, and it could be called a complete darkness. At this moment, if a force or country suddenly rose up, it would be very difficult for others to join forces to resist. This was an opportunity. With these thoughts in mind, Yang Qindong boarded the carriage and returned to the Yang Manor. The task of cleaning up Blackwell Street was handed over to Sun Pa, one of the commanders of the Warden's Office of the Five Cities, and Wang Bo, the deputy of the Supreme Court. There should not be any problems. The next step was to calculate the results of the battle, and then how to make the data look better. Anyone with a little brain would know what to do. For Yang Qindong, this operation was more of a deterrent, a timely show of the tiger's fangs to warn some people. As for how Zhu Qiyu, who had begun to counterattack because of this matter, would change the defense, he would just treat it as a big show to watch. In any case, no matter who it was, he believed that they wouldn't touch him unless they had absolute confidence. Of course, he did it on purpose this time. He wanted to find an excuse for himself and for Zhu Qiyu. He believed that when the right time came, he would be able to grasp it. Before the opportunity appeared, Yang Qindong still focused on the Yang Academy. If everything went well, he would probably leave the capital for a period of time. Before that, how to train the first batch of students was a must. Just like a tiger patrolling the mountains, Yang Qindong returned to the Yang family manor after showing off his prowess. From all kinds of information, it seemed that he was once again the head of the academy with only a few dozen students. When this news spread, many of the important officials were puzzled. Among the officials of the great Ming dynasty, Yang Qindong was definitely an exception and a different existence. Only the Confucian school was respected, so the status of scholars and learned people was far higher than the other common people, merchants, craftsmen, and soldiers. Under the policy of using literature to suppress force, the status of scholars in society was even higher. They seemed to be able to casually point out the country and make judgments about the affairs of the world. Coupled with the fact that they were from the same sect, it was easier for them to band together. This led to the situation where the scholar officials and the emperor ruled the world. Yang Qindong was the descendant of Yang Rong, the son of the three Yangs. Even if he didn't know anything, with his status, he wouldn't have a bad life. As long as he had a little ability, he would be able to sit high in the imperial court. It was even possible for him to repeat the past glory of the Yang clan. This was the so-called good birth. However, Yang Qindong had good birth and was extremely capable. He had even made great contributions and was greatly indebted to both the northern and southern emperors of the great Ming dynasty. If such a person were to sit high in the imperial court, he would be a symbol of a boundless future. Once he had enough experience, it was not impossible for him to become an important official or even a powerful official. It could be said that his future was bright, but he showed that he was uninterested in the imperial court. All he cared about every day was doing business and teaching students. He didn't teach orthodox Confucianism, nor did he teach the Analects of Confucius, the 4 books, or the 5 classics. Instead, he included magic, chemistry, physics, geography, and other things that were called unorthodox at that time. Under the rule of Confucianism, the status of merchants was very low. Even if you were rich, even very rich, if you didn't have enough background, everything you had would become a gift to others. This was the reason why many famous merchants would still be very respectful when facing aristocratic families who were far less wealthy than them. However, it was this business that wasn't recognized by mainstream society that Yang Qindong was willing to dive into and play with. Doing business, teaching unorthodox methods, all these actions really gave people a feeling of not doing proper work. This was what made the important officials and even the acting sect master, Zhu Qijin, unable to understand. Sometimes the emperor who had stolen his brother's throne couldn't help but wonder what the Duke of Loyalty and Courage that he had bestowed upon him actually wanted. Was he really uninterested in the imperial court? If that was the case, wasn't his targeting a little too excessive? Wasn't he being too sensitive? If even the emperor was thinking this, the other officials were even less able to understand. As the one being suspected, Yang Qindong didn't seem to care about what others thought. After returning to the academy, he became a serious and solemn teacher, diligently teaching his students. His 4 wives and concubines continued to enter the capital that morning. Those who were practicing in the immortal abode and those who were taking in the women on the streets were still doing so. It was as if they were completely unaffected by the bombardment, as if the incident at Blackwell Street had never happened. It was precisely this seemingly ordinary behavior that left everyone scratching their heads in confusion. After thinking about it for a while, everyone turned their attention back to their own matters. Although the bombardment in the middle of the night was still there, it was only aimed at Blackwell Street. Since it didn't have anything to do with them, they naturally went back to what they were doing. Only a few people with deep foresight could vaguely see that this young Duke of Great Ming's loyal and courageous actions were all practical matters. Developing commerce was accumulating money. Yang Bao was controlling public opinion. The immortal abode was expanding its influence. The Yang clan's bank was hoarding money. And even the Yang clan's academy was teaching pragmatism. It was just that the majority of people couldn't see it clearly. But regardless, the storm gradually calmed down. Some of the officials who had thought that something major was about to happen breathed a sigh of relief. More attention was placed on the matter of changing the guard of the army. When it came to the mobilization of hundreds of thousands of troops, there were a lot of things that needed to be done, a lot of money needed to be spent, and there were also a lot of empty seats. How to curry favor with them and get what they wanted was what the officials should consider and do. With Zhu Qiyu's approval and powerful officials like Shi Heng and Ming taking charge, the matter of changing the guard of the army began to unfold with great vigor. Squad after squad of soldiers walked out of the capital, and squad after squad of soldiers entered the capital in an orderly fashion. This display of the great Ming's military strength allowed even more officials and nobles to relax and enjoy their lives. But in the wake of all this, countless families had been destroyed and countless people had been lost. The officials turned their attention away from Yang Qindong, but there were still some people who paid attention to this person. In an unremarkable Chengshan Inn in the capital, in the dimly lit backyard, a tall man was standing there, listening to a man whose eyes occasionally flashed with killing intent. Big brother Yen, my big brother and third brother died, too unjustly this time. You have to uphold justice for us. The shorter man, who was dressed like a wanderer of the Jianghu, had said many things before concluding with these words. He seemed to be weeping about something. Unjustly. The person who was addressed as Big Brother Yen uttered one word. It was unknown whether he was sighing or speaking from his emotions. He shook his head lightly and continued. You two brothers went up against the Duke of Loyalty and Courage of the great Ming dynasty, who is also known as the God of War. Since you did it, you should have expected such an ending. Yes, we were careless in this matter, but no matter what, he shouldn't have been so ruthless. It's a pity that my elder brother was killed by the bombardment in the secret passage, and my third brother was killed by a flintlock. If I don't do something, I won't have the face to see my brothers after I die, the scholar continued to speak. He didn't seem to want to give up. At this point, everyone should know that this scholar was the second master of the Blackwater gang, Wu Yong, who is also known as the military advisor. He also thought that this operation would be too challenging, so he made 3 preparations. However, he never expected that the other party had no intention of tangling with him at all. Instead, the other party used an advanced firearm and ended everything with a single push. Chapter 3:14. Yesterday at this time, the 3 brothers were still drinking and eating meat together, imagining the beautiful future after this deal was completed. But today he was the only one left alive. How could he be satisfied? As for the brother standing in front of him, his name was Yen Tao. He had always had a good relationship with the boss of the Blackwater gang, Hu Huaihai. It was said that boss who had saved his life before. Now, this person had an identity that could not be ignored. He was the chief arrestor of the Ministry of Justice. The arrestor was the so-called criminal police of the Public Security Bureau. Usually, such a person was not only good at fighting, but also very smart. And to be able to stand out in this team and become the chief arrestor, it could be seen how good his fighting skills and wisdom were. Even in this environment where officials and nobles gathered in the capital, the identity of the chief arrestor of the Ministry of Justice was also well known and could not be ignored. It was precisely because of his power that Wu Yong found Yen Tao after escaping from the attack of the Wolf's Fang to avenge his brothers. Of course, this time his opponent was Yang Qindong. Wu Yong knew that it was not realistic to only rely on the previous kindness to persuade him. So when he asked Yen Tao to come out, he also made another preparation, which was to give him a big gift. In this world, living was nothing more than living for nothing more than a mouth. Under this condition, how to live a better life, more face, and more status would become a higher level of pursuit. People like Yen Tao naturally had face, and even some power. But because of the importance of his position, there were many people who had their eyes on him. There were not many ways to live a more luxurious life in terms of money. Wu Yong saw this point, and this time he used it as a breakthrough point. Seeing that Yen Tao did not agree to avenge his elder brother and third brother, he gritted his teeth and said, "Big brother Yen, as long as you can avenge my elder brother and younger brother, the Blackwater gang is willing to give you all the benefits that we have accumulated over the years." Hearing the benefits, Yen Tao seemed to be confused, but the fast twitching of the corner of his eyes was still noticed by the clever Wu Yong. "That's right. It's the gold and silver that we've plundered over the years. Adding it all together, it's about 800,000 taels. As long as we can take revenge, all of this will belong to Brother Yen." 800,000 taels was undoubtedly a huge sum of money. Although Yen Tao was one of the chief constables of the Ministry of Justice, and people often gave him gifts, it was still a lot less than this amount. No one would be moved by it. On the other side, Wu Yong had already used his trump card. Naturally, he wouldn't stop there. He continued to say, "Big Brother Yen, although the matter between you and our Blackwater gang is secretive, it's not like we don't have any clues. If you really want to find it, it's possible. With that loyal and courageous Duke's character, he must have found out about our previous relationship. Would he spare me? But with these 800,000 taels of silver, it will be different. You can no longer be a constable. You can go far away at any time and find a place where no one knows you to be a rich man. Wouldn't that be great?" On one hand, there were threats, and on the other hand, there were benefits. It was a game of steamed buns and sticks, and in Yen Tao's ears, there was no doubt that there were bolts of thunder. Even if he wanted to peacefully deal with the matter in front of him, he probably couldn't. After an unknown amount of time, perhaps it was very fast, perhaps it was the time to brew a cup of tea, or perhaps it was an hour, he finally heard the sound of a long exhalation. Obviously, he had already made a decision. This matter is troublesome. You can stay here first. Don't worry, this is one of the strongholds under my jurisdiction. No one will find this place. Yen Tao agreed. Wu Yong's face was immediately filled with joy as he said, "I'll listen to Big Brother Yen. I'll stay here." Wu Yong was confident that Yen Tao wouldn't do anything to him. He didn't see any benefits, nor did he see any other brothers. Who knew if he had left any backup plans outside? Once something happened, his relationship with the Blackwater gang would be exposed to the world. Relying on this, Yen Tao naturally didn't dare to have any devious thoughts. Even if there was one, it could only appear when he killed Yang Qindong and got the money to escape to the end of the world. Seeing that Wu Yong was so tactful, Yen Tao nodded his head in satisfaction. "But since we have to make preparations, we can't do without the silver taels. Don't worry, Big Brother Yen. I'll arrange for someone to send the silver taels over tonight. Is 400,000 taels enough?" "It's enough," Yen Tao happily replied. In a sense, these 400,000 taels of silver were taken from the 800,000 taels that he deserved. According to the rules of the martial arts world, he had to collect half of it as a deposit. From the looks of it, Yen Tao was really prepared to help. After discussing the matter and appeasing Wu Yong, Yen Tao left Qingshan. However, he didn't go in the direction of the Ministry of Justice. Instead, he walked a few rounds on the streets, as if he was bored. After confirming that no one had seen him, he went in the direction of the Yu residence. Yu Shuriwa, the current Minister of Justice, was deeply trusted by the current emperor. He should have had a bright future and limitless glory. However, because of a conflict with the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong, his grandson, Yu Xiong, was sentenced to death. His eldest grandson, Yu Yuanbi, also suffered in prison. In addition, Su Yojin was assigned to the Ministry of Justice as the left assistant minister, with the intention of replacing Yu Shuriwa. The Yu residence, which was supposed to be bustling with people and carriages, became much quieter. After all, he was still the Minister of Justice. And there were still many officials who came to visit him every day. By the time Yen Tao arrived, he could only enter from the side door. The head constable of the Ministry of Justice. It sounded like a very prestigious title, but in the minister's residence, it was just a small official. If Yen Tao wasn't someone who was promoted by Yu Shuriwa and had come to the Yu residence before, and the gatekeeper knew him, it would be difficult for him to enter through the side door. Even if he entered the Yu residence, he might not be able to see the minister. He came to a slightly remote side hall and waited for more than 2 hours. After drinking a few pots of tea, he finally heard the sound of footsteps outside the door. "Master is receiving guests in the front hall. Please wait a moment, Constable Yen." The Yu residence steward who was in charge of leading him said with a formal smile. "Okay." Yen Tao knew that the steward was just being polite on the surface. Regardless of whether the minister was really receiving guests or not, if someone of his status wanted to see the minister, it was necessary to wait a little longer. This was the place where he could show his prestige. Speaking of which, Yen Tao's skills were not bad. Even in the Jianghu he was quite famous. It was not an exaggeration to call him a first-class master. However, under the environment that emphasized culture and suppressed martial arts, not to mention a constable with good skills, even a general who killed on the battlefield would not have any status in the minister's residence. This was the rule under the influence of the Confucian school. Martial artists were not valued and were seen as simple-minded and physically developed. Such people had no future and could even be the main factor in civil strife. Merchants were suppressed because they were seen as people who only cared about profit. Such people, if there was milk, then there was mother. They had no father, country, or family in their eyes. For profit, they would do anything and betray anyone. Speaking of which, Yen Tao sat in a side hall and stayed there for more than half an hour. However, he sat upright and there was no trace of anxiety on his face. It could be seen that he was a person who could achieve great things. Time passed little by little and there was a sound of footsteps in the distance. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Yen Tao quickly stood up with a very respectful look. However, when the person appeared, he raised his head and there was a slight surprise in his eyes. "Young master, you?" "That's right, it's me." "Grandfather knew that you were here, but there was something he couldn't get away from, so he let me come." "Ha ha! Constable Yen, take a seat." The person who came was Yu Yuanbi, Yu Shiyue's most admired eldest grandson. In order to train him, he would usually be in charge of receiving guests when there was no important matter. This was also a method of training. The minister did not appear, but Yu Yuanbi did. Yen Tao was somewhat disappointed. However, when he thought about how Yu Xiong had died at the hands of the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong, he had a glimmer of hope in his heart. Perhaps this person wanted revenge more than him. As a hot-blooded young man, he should be easier to fool than a minister like Yu Shiyue. After making up his mind, Yen Tao's expression became much calmer. He first sat down, then held a cup of tea and said casually, "Actually, this constable didn't come here for anything. I just thought that the 7th day of young master Yu Xiong's death is coming, so I came to pay my respects." Suddenly, Yu Xiong's name was mentioned. Yu Xiong's death could be said to be the shame of the entire Yu family. Now that someone mentioned it in front of him, and only as a chief constable, Yu Yuanbi's expression changed. He said with a livid face, "Yen Tao, what are you trying to do? Don't you want to work anymore? Young master Yu, please calm down. Things are not what you think. In fact, this constable is here for this matter. Instead of keeping the matter of young master Yu Xiong under wraps, it would be better to take revenge. That would be the only way to solve the problem. But I don't know if young master Yu Xiong has the guts to do such a thing." As a chief constable, Yen Tao's ability to grasp people's hearts was very strong when interrogating criminals. This time, he used provocation to force Yu Yuanbi to make a choice. "Revenge? Haha! You're just a lowly chief constable with an insignificant official position. How dare you speak of this lightly? Unless you have some ability?" Yu Yuanbi could roughly guess Yen Tao's background. However, when he thought of Yang Qindong's power and ability, he still did not dare to do anything. Chapter 315. Just as young master Yu said, this constable does have some ability. At least I still have some useful people in my hands. After saying all this with a smile on his face, Yen Tao suddenly leaned forward and said a name from his mouth. It was Wu Yong's name. The Black Water Gang had been wiped out overnight. Only the second-in-command, Wu Yong, had escaped. Now that they were in the middle of a large-scale manhunt, any smart person would be able to guess why Yen Tao suddenly mentioned this person. Oh! Yu Yuanbi's expression instantly lit up. He finally knew why Yen Tao had come to find him. He really did have some confidence. Just as Yunbi was thinking, Yen Tao's voice sounded in his ear again. If the matter is done well, we can naturally take revenge. Even if it isn't done well, it has nothing to do with us. We won't lose anything. Besides, as long as the plan is well thought out, there shouldn't be any accidents in a surprise attack. After all, humans have flaws. Humans are made of flesh and blood. Swords and spears can take lives. Not bad, not bad. Yunbi laughed loudly, then pointed to the teacup on the table and said, "Big brother Yen, please have some tea." Yunbi had changed the way he addressed Yen Tao from Constable Yen to Big Brother Yen. This was his way of expressing their closeness, and it also meant that he would support the other party. How could Yen Tao not feel it? He immediately laughed and drank from the teacup. "Good, let's have some tea together. Speaking of which, the tea in the minister's residence is really good. Haha, if Big Brother Yen likes it, you can bring some back later," Yunbi said with a face full of enthusiasm. After that, the two of them lowered their heads and conspired for a long time. When Yen Tao left satisfied, he went straight to his grandfather's study. Yunbi had made the decision on his own and agreed to cooperate with Yen Tao. This wasn't a whim, but because he knew that if the Yu family wanted to develop Yang Qindong, this stumbling block had to be kicked away. Otherwise, if they couldn't even protect themselves, how could they talk about spreading their name? After understanding all this, he predicted that even if his grandfather knew about this matter, he wouldn't object. Sure enough, he entered the study and explained to Yu Shuriwa why Yen Tao came. The Minister of Justice was silent for a while before nodding. "Do things secretly. However, since we're going to make a move, we can't give the other party the slightest chance. You should also go and make some arrangements. If the time is right, you can add a stab. In short, it's fine if you don't make a move. But if you do, it must be a thunderous method." He never thought that his grandfather would put everything on the line and ask him to do it himself. Yunbi couldn't help but say excitedly, "Grandfather, don't worry. I'll make the arrangements right away. As long as there's a chance, I'll definitely make him suffer the pain of having his heart pierced by thousands of arrows." The reason why Yushuriwa was so ruthless was naturally because the situation in the imperial court was already pressuring him. Especially after Su Yojin became the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. This person wantonly bought people's hearts and had already begun to shake his authority in the Ministry of Justice. If he couldn't deal with the foreign enemy Yang Qindong, it wouldn't be long before his position as Minister of Justice would be useless. Since there was no way out, he could only take the initiative to attack. Yen Tao's arrival was no doubt tantamount to giving him a chance to make a move. Although there were risks, but wealth was originally sought in the midst of danger. How could one achieve great things without being ruthless? Moreover, after Yen Tao left the Yu residence, he went to contact Wu Yong. Yen Tao was like a walker walking in the dark. At night, he knocked on the door of Qing Shunin and saw the second-in-command of the Blackwater Gang, Wu Yong, who was waiting for news. Wu Yong was already burning with anxiety. He was even prepared to escape at any time because he really didn't know whether Yen Tao was reliable or not. Although he was indebted to this person in the past, it didn't prevent him from suddenly killing him. However, the moment he saw the tall Yen Tao appear, Wu Yong still looked very calm. At least on the surface, there wasn't the slightest hint of fear or terror. To be able to become one of the 4 chief constables of the Ministry of Justice, Yen Tao was not only skilled in martial arts, but also unusually quick-witted. He might have thought of something long ago, but just didn't want to say it. Tonight he came here for business. He went to the home of the minister of the Ministry of Justice and gained a lot. This time, he came here to tell him part of his plan. "Second Master Wu, I've decided to help you. Here's a list of materials. They are all bloody men in the Green Forest. They only recognize money and not people. How to persuade them to help you? You just have to work hard. But remember, if there is no accident, there will be an opportunity in a few days. Whether you can seize it or not depends on you. After putting down the information on the mercenaries in the capital, Yen Tao stayed for a while longer before leaving. He knew of Wu Yong's abilities, and he was confident that he would have no problem recruiting these men to work for him for the time being. As for the people in the materials, in fact, they were some bandits with names in the Ministry of Justice. Some of them even had bloody cases. Such people were the so-called scum of society. However, it was undeniable that these people had a clean background. Even if someone wanted to use them, it would only be a temporary exchange of power and money. No one would support them. This way, it could be guaranteed that when they were used, the news would not be leaked out quickly. Moreover, with Wu Yong's intelligence, he would not make things too clear. As long as he paid, he would let these people work for him. As for who he killed, those people would not know until the last moment. In a few days, Wu Yong should be able to do this. As the local boss of the underworld in the capital and the former second-in-command of the Blackwater Gang, his ability should not be underestimated. In 1451 AD, the second year of Jingtai of the Ming dynasty, the Miao people's uprising began. Ming and Ming were the princes of the Min Zhuang king, Zhu Yuanzhang, the 18th son of Zhu Yuanzhang. In the first year of Jingtai, 1450, Zhu Yuanzhang died, followed by Ming. Ming, the king of Guangdong, was brave and strong. His family, Duan Yuhong, was favored by the king because of his excellent skills. Later, Yu Libin said that Ming was abnormal and should be the ruler of the world. Thus, Ming started a rebellion. He made a fake imperial edict and sent Duan Yuhong, Mengning, and Chen Tianqing to the Miao people's territory. He used silver seals and gold coins to lure the Miao people to attack Wugong. After the Ming dynasty's southern emperor, Zhu Qijin, heard the news, he sent the governor of Huguang, Wang Lai, and the chief military officer, Liang Luo, to suppress the rebellion. After Zhu Qijin went through the Tumu incident, his personality became more gloomy and his methods became more ruthless. After he gained a foothold in the original capital of Nanjing, he began to reform the governance of officials and started to train soldiers. Courage after knowing shame. Because of his experience, Zhu Qijin knew that the so-called under one above all, under the Ming dynasty, and under the emperor's wisdom were all fake. Only a strong military force and an abundant national treasury would be the true core of the country. In order to achieve this goal, he issued a series of orders, and the entire South began to expand the source of soldiers. Under the eyes of many, soldiers were forcefully arresting strong men, causing the originally rich South to be in a mess. Who knew how many families were torn apart because of this? Because of this, some scholars openly expressed their opposition. Some even said that this was clearly militaristic and not the way of a saint. In the past, the emperor had always been very tolerant of scholars. This was because many times they represented the will of the people and the will of the world. If one offended them, it would be difficult to have a good reputation among the people, and there might even be chaos. However, Zhu Qijin, who had a goal in mind, was ruthless this time. Any scholar who dared to talk about national affairs, especially those who criticized his actions, were all arrested. He did not hesitate to become enemies with some scholars because he wanted to restore the glory of the great Ming dynasty. He wanted to unify the north and south of the great Ming dynasty. He wanted to wash away the shame of his past. He wanted to be a wise ruler of a generation, a ruler of prosperity. In order to achieve his goal, he would do anything. It was also because of this that many scholars were implicated. Although some aristocratic families were still deeply rooted and were not implicated by this matter, they still had their own opinions. At this time, after King Min Zhuang succeeded the throne, he declared that the people of the world should be ruled by the people of the world. He declared that he wanted to become the ruler of the world. The difference between here and in history was that the Miao tribe leader Yang Wenba supported his actions. The reason was simple. Previously, when Zhu Qijin recruited soldiers, he caused a lot of trouble in the south, which made Yang Wenba hate him. In addition, Zhu Qijin was no longer the only ruler of the great Ming dynasty. In the north, there was still the existence of the substitute Zhu Qiyu, who was enough to compete with Zhu Qizhen. This greatly weakened Zhu Qizhen's strength. Therefore, Yang Wenba made a decision that was different from history. He supported the king of Min Zhuang instead. With Yang Wenba's support, King Min's strength increased greatly. Wugong, which was located in the southwest of Hunan province, was broken through in 3 days. After winning the first battle and taking down King Min's emblem, he finally gained the recognition of some aristocratic families. After receiving some support in terms of gold, silver, and grain, his power increased. He had the potential to become the king of the south. When King Min's matter came out, Zhu Qizhen naturally flew into a rage. While sending troops, he also sighed in the palace. Zhu Qiyu took the throne when his life and death was uncertain. It could be said that there was a reason for this, although Zhu Qiyu did not recognize him later. When he came to Nanjing to establish the South Ming dynasty, Zhu Qiyu did not do anything to stop him. To put it bluntly, Zhu Qiyu acknowledged his existence in private. On the surface, Zhu Qiyu still called him King Yu. This was something that could not be helped. However, who was Zhu Huizhen? He was just a small descendant of King Minzhuang. How dare he call himself a king? This was touching his reverse scale. Even if there was internal friction, he would not let him make a big deal out of it. In the palace, Zhu Qizhen was not in a good mood. He was so tired that Empress Qian was also in a bad mood. Chapter 316. It was a common situation in the great Ming dynasty at that time, not to mention that Empress Qian had always loved Zhu Qizhen. If Empress Qian was worried, she would be more worried. Empress, His Majesty is talented and intelligent. You don't have to worry too much. A young eunuch was standing beside Empress Qian and speaking carefully. He was a eunuch who was not very old, but had an extraordinary manner of speech. He was Mao Mu, the eunuch who had been indebted to Yang Qindong and was later ordered to follow Empress Qian out of the capital. Before the Tumu incident, Mao Mu already had some status in the imperial harem. Zhu Qizhen's life was unknown, and the chief eunuch, Wang Zhen, died in the chaos. As a eunuch promoted by Wang Zhen, he was also implicated. It was only after he took out most of his wealth that he was able to save his life. It was not until Yang Qindong returned to the capital that everything became better. Later, he approached Empress Qian on behalf of Yang Qindong and finally came to Nanjing. After seeing Zhu Qizhen become the South Emperor, he became the most trusted eunuch of Empress Qian and had some status in Zhu Qizhen's heart. Seeing that his master, Empress Qian, was in a depressed mood, Mao Mu tried to explain carefully. Alas, His Majesty's fate is not good. Since he came to Nanjing, he has always wanted to be the master of prosperity, but things are not going well. Every time I see this, I feel uneasy. I always want to do something, but I am short-sighted. I can only work hard to deal with the affairs of the imperial harem and try not to let His Majesty worry. Empress Qian shook her head and was angry at herself. Speaking of which, Empress Qian did love Zhu Qizhen very much. In history, she had done her best to protect her man, but she also had a tragic end. In this life, because of the appearance of Yang Qindong, she did not have to be so wronged, but because she loved Zhu Qizhen too deeply. How could she be happy when Zhu Qizhen was unhappy? Seeing that Empress Qian was in a bad mood, Mao Mu blinked and then said in a low voice, "Empress, in fact, the problem of Nanjiang is not that difficult. You just need to send an army and sweep it." Sweep away? Empress Qian trusted Mao Mu very much, so she was not angry because of the other party's arrogance. She just shook her head after listening. Although I don't know what political affairs are, I have heard that Zhu Huichen is now in contact with Rongkong, Xiping Homubin, Duke Qian, in the name of jointly ruling the world. His power is getting stronger and stronger. Rongkong, Xiping Homubin, was a member of the Mu clan. They had been living in Yunnan for many years and had been helping the great Ming dynasty resist the covetous eyes of Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam until the end of the Ming dynasty. At the time when he was in the middle of the great Ming dynasty, he still had some strength. If he cooperated with Zhu Huihua, it would undoubtedly be like a heavy hammer smashing towards Zhu Qiyu. The politics of the southern Ming Empire would truly be in danger. As the head of the palace eunuchs, Mao Mu was second only to Chao Jixiang, who was favored by Zhu Qizhen. He naturally knew about this matter. Hearing Empress Qian's words, he smiled. Empress need not worry. The Mu family's loyalty is not a problem. He will not walk together with a traitor like Zhu Huiqin. Yes, His Majesty has also said this. Ben Gong also knows. But I heard that it is not peaceful there. Several small countries are beginning to stir. It is not easy for Rongkong, Shiping Ho to suppress them. He is unable to send troops to help His Majesty quell the rebellion. Empress Qian first nodded as if sighing for Mu Bin's inability to send troops. But then she shook her head. Thinking that the current situation was not as she wished, she felt a bit sad. Since Rongkong Shiping Ho is unable to send troops, why not ask the Duke of Loyalty and Courage to help? Mao Mu seemed to speak emotionally, but after saying this, he quickly shut his mouth and knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, this subject misspoke. And, facing Mao Mu's performance, Empress Qian was first stunned. Then something seemed to flash through her mind. Wait, what did you just say? This subject misspoke. Empress, please punish me. At this moment, Mao Mu lowered his head deeply, looking like he had done something wrong. Mao Mu's actions were indeed too much. How could he, a eunuch, talk about national affairs at any time? The aftermath of Wang Zhen's intimidation of the government was not over. Based on what he said just now, even if he had to be convicted, it would not be too much. Empress Qian did not think so much. She was only thinking about Zhu Qizhen. She did not intend to pursue Mao Mu's unintentional words. On the contrary, when the title of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage came out, the young man who saved her from the palace flashed through her mind. For some reason, she seemed to see a light in her originally gloomy heart. He? Empress Qian seemed to be talking to herself, but also seemed to be asking Mao Mu in front of her. Mao Mu's head was originally lowered, but his eyes were constantly moving. He knew his identity. He was a spy arranged by Yang Qindong around Zhu Qizhen. When something big happened here, he could ensure that he could get accurate information at the first time. This time, the Security Bureau, which rarely contacted him, directly found him and said that the 6th young master was preparing to go south. They asked him to coordinate and find an opportunity to command troops. Since he took the job, he had to do it. Originally, Mao Mu did not know how to ask. Using Zhu Huihua's matter, he found a breakthrough. Seeing that Empress Qian seemed to be moved, he tried to answer carefully. Your Highness, this subject thinks it should be possible. After all, when the Emperor was in trouble, he did a lot. Now that the army is in chaos, if the Duke of Loyalty and Courage can come, it should not be a big problem. He has the title of Army God. Army God? Yes, this Empress has heard of him, but he is now in the capital in the north. Will he come here to help the Emperor? Empress Qian asked uncertainly. Whether he will or not, we have to try. After all, he is a subject of the great Ming, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Now that the army in the Walla in the north has retreated for a long time, presumably the Duke of Loyalty and Courage will not be of much use there. Mao Mu was still speaking carefully, but the speed of his speech was getting faster and faster, and his mind was getting more agile. Yes, we can try, Empress Qian muttered to herself, and then suddenly stood up as if she thought of something. At this moment, the helpless look on her face was completely different from before. It was as if she had suddenly found a good way. She wanted to see the Emperor. Yang Family Academy. After experiencing the bombardment of Blackwell Street, the enthusiasm of the students here was even higher. The fact told everyone that what they were learning would be the most advanced thing in the current society. Thinking about how the mountain head science could create such a huge commotion and how it could be so lethal, everyone's learning was no longer supervised by others. They all took the initiative to learn. Because of her identity and because she was a girl, Junko did not get the opportunity to go to Blackwell Street to observe. But from the mouths of other students, she still learned what happened that night. Although the students had different descriptions of the cannons, there was one thing that couldn't be wrong, and that was the power of the cannons. They could kill people as if they were weeds. Thinking that if such a thing could be used by her father, then the situation in Japan might be better. Her father would no longer be a puppet, and he would have real power, and then lead Japan into a stage of rapid development. After having such thoughts in her heart, Junko could no longer calm down. She began to have ideas about Yang Qindong. Junko's Chinese was barely passable, but in terms of learning, she naturally could not be compared with the students of the great Ming dynasty. After all, her foundation was not solid, but fortunately she had a shortcut, and that was to directly find the owner of this advanced artillery, Yang Qindong. After having this idea and thinking about the benefits she could give, Junko saw that Yang Qindong was about to leave after the class, so she trotted all the way to catch up with him. Yang Qindong, who was holding a textbook in his hand, felt Junko chasing behind him, and his footsteps could not help but slow down a little. Mountain head, wait a minute. His footsteps paused slightly. Yang Qindong looked back with a faint smile on his face. Junko, what's the hurry? Mountain head, no. Zhongdan Kuin, I have something to discuss with you. Junko thought that when talking about business, it was better not to talk about it with the relationship between a student and a teacher. Oh, seeing that Junko was so formal, Yang Qindong nodded slightly and said, Then let's talk while walking. The path leading to the inner courtyard of Yang village, one tall and one short, a man and a woman slowly walked under the afterglow of the setting sun. Zhongdan Kuin, I heard about the bombardment of Kyujing Street. I want to buy those artillery. Name a price, no matter how much money it is. I can find a way to get it. Junko's voice was filled with great determination. She had known Yang Qindong for a long time, and she knew that he did not like to beat around the bush, so she simply went straight to the point. Buy artillery? Yang Qindong was stunned for a moment before he shook his head. I'm sorry, I borrowed the cannon. The implication was that the artillery was not his. Junko naturally knew a little about this. She knew that there were powerful mercenaries behind this Zhongdan Kuin. Presumably, those artillery should be in the hands of those mercenaries. But even though she knew this, Junko still put her hope on Yang Qindong. Lord Zhongdan, Junko knows your relationship with the mercenaries. Can you negotiate with them to sell me 2 cannons? If you can't, just one is fine too. How much money do you want? We can discuss it. Junko wanted to transport the artillery back to Japan, then bombard the general's residence, just like how they bombarded Kyujing Street, razing it to the ground. In this way, the general and his aides would die under the artillery, and his subordinates would be like a group of dragons without a leader. Then the emperor would take the opportunity to seize the real power. And to do all this, she could only do it through Yang Qindong. Her face was full of hope. No matter how much money it is, Yang Qindong pretended to be very curious and asked. Chapter 317. Yes, we can discuss any amount. Junko blinked her beautiful big eyes. Any amount is negotiable. Yang Qindong repeated this sentence and saw the sincerity in the other party's eyes. He couldn't help but smile and said, But do you know that when I wanted to buy one, the other party asked for 10 million taels? 10 million taels. Hiss. After hearing the price, a look of shock flashed across Junko Yu's face, followed by hesitation and confusion. Ha ha ha. Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh after seeing her reaction. He turned and left. He knew that Junko had to think about some things carefully before coming to a decision. He couldn't push her too hard at this moment. As a person of the future, Yang Qindong naturally didn't have a good impression of Japan. If possible, he would bring Lung Feng over. Rather than say that he was going to reform them, it was better to swallow them whole. It would be more satisfying to rule the world. However, although Lung Feng's development was going smoothly, it was still very difficult to reach a certain scale due to the limitations of the environment, population, and wealth. Even if he was in the capital, he could only do things to intimidate others. He couldn't really overthrow them. Where would he find the time and effort to do anything to Japan? He wasn't strong enough, but that didn't mean that he couldn't do something first. For example, he could disrupt the internal affairs of Japan. This way, it would be much easier to deal with the empty Japan in the future. For this matter, Yang Qindong had thought of a few methods in his mind. However, he was still far away from Japan. A small fight wouldn't solve the problem, but he wasn't strong enough to fight a big fight. Without full confidence, he didn't do anything. Junko taking the initiative to look for him might be a chance for Yang Qindong. How could he let go of a chance to earn money? As for asking for 10 million taels of silver, it might seem like a lot to others, but he knew that Junko would definitely agree. However, in Yang Qindong's heart, making money was secondary. More importantly, he wanted to see the civil strife in Japan. He had already done some things before, but he always felt that it was not enough. He still needed to do more things. In that way, when Japan faced internal and external troubles, the pressure would be a lot less. After leaving Yang Qindong, Junko went to find her guard captain, Kobayashi. During this period of time, Shaolin was like a sponge, constantly absorbing water. The training methods of the Yang family manor were not hidden from him. After he saw it, he learned a lot. Only then did he realize how soldiers should be trained. Only then could they be truly elite. When Junko came to find Kobayashi, he was recording something in Japanese in his room. A good memory was not as good as a good pen. This was a common saying in many cases. Your Highness. As soon as she saw Junko open the door, Kobayashi was about to salute her out of habit. Forget it, there's no one else here. Junko shook her head, then sat on the chair for receiving guests, then looked at Kobayashi with sparkling eyes and asked, You must have heard about the artillery, right? Yes, I heard about it. I also took the time to go to Kyujing Street to take a look. The destructive power was really amazing. Shaolin, who replied, couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine when he thought of the collapsed houses that he saw. He even wondered what kind of destruction such a powerful cannon would cause if it hit Japanese soil. Who would be able to withstand it? Yang Qindong's sense of mystery and power strengthened in Kobayashi's heart. Then tell me, if these things could be used by your father, would the Supreme General still dare to be so domineering? After Kobayashi finished speaking, Junko lightly opened her red lips and asked, Ah, what? For a moment, Kobayashi was a little confused by this question, but after he reacted, he said with some excitement, Is he willing to give such powerful firearms to us? I bet he's already talked to him. We can buy it. But the price is a little more expensive. 10 million taels per cannon. Junko nodded. She didn't know if this was good news or bad news. Hiss! Kobayashi sucked in a breath of cold air. It was obvious that he was really shocked by this number. 10 million taels. Even at the peak of the Ming dynasty, it took 2 years of tax revenue to reach this amount. Japan was much smaller than the Ming dynasty, so it was unknown how long it would take to gather this number. But thinking about it, although the number was huge, if they could really get it, it would be worth it. Not to mention that with this thing, the emperor would be the real emperor. Just with the specimen, they could later imitate it. Everyone had one head and 2 shoulders, so why could others create it, but they couldn't? Thinking of this, Kobayashi's eyes began to burn with passion. Your Highness, this is a good thing. Even you think so? If I send you back, will you be able to persuade father? Junko was waiting for Kobayashi to say this. The sudden change made Kobayashi finally understand the purpose of Junko's visit, and he couldn't help but fall into silence. 10 million taels of silver was a large amount, and he had to return to Japan. But his status was low, so he couldn't guarantee that he would be able to do it. The best way was, of course, to let Junko go back. But Kobayashi also knew that if Junko left now, who knew what would happen? Even if he had the money in the future, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to buy the cannon. If that was the case, wouldn't it be a waste? While Kobayashi was still hesitating, Junko said anxiously, "Kobayashi, I will write a letter to father, please." After saying this, she bowed deeply to Kobayashi. "Your Highness, please don't. I will try." Kobayashi saw Junko's action and knew that he couldn't avoid it. He thought that it was better to give it a try, and if it didn't work, he would just take a trip back to Japan and then find an opportunity to come back here. Kobayashi finally agreed, and Junko's face flashed with a charming smile. "Then I will go and talk to him, and then I will write a letter to father. You should be prepared." Junko quickly appeared in front of Yang Qindong and said that she wanted to buy the cannon. Of course, she still didn't say her identity, only that her family was very interested in it, and that such a powerful cannon could be sold at a higher price once it was shipped to Japan. 10 million taels of silver. This was already a heaven-defying price. Yang Qindong really couldn't think of any other price. But for Junko's completely self-deceiving idea, he could only nod. He also promised that once he saw the money, he didn't need to come to the great Ming dynasty anymore, and he could go to Little Li Island to trade. And for safety, the mercenaries could escort the cannon to Japan's territorial waters. Junko was naturally happy that her safety was guaranteed. She was still very confident about whether or not she could get the cannon with the money. The source of this confidence was naturally her understanding of Yang Qindong. She knew that this person was a person who kept his promises, and he would never deceive her. Soon, Junko finished writing a letter. She wrote down what she had seen and heard in the great Ming dynasty, including the incident where her country sent samurai to attack the Tianjin garrison a while ago. She emphasized that the great Ming dynasty was now very powerful, and it was far from what the weak Japan could touch. She also hoped that father could stabilize the situation in the country and strengthen himself first. As for the power of the cannon, she wrote in detail. The most important thing was that with this weapon, it could instantly turn the general's mansion into a piece of scorched earth. And at that time, it would be the time when the imperial power would be concentrated. That night, Kobayashi left with a letter written by Junko and under the protection of 2 soldiers sent by Yang Qindong. He would go straight to Tianjin Guard, where there would be a special ship to send him back to Japan. Sometimes opportunities were fleeting, sometimes rare, but sometimes they came as they wished. It was unknown whether the Yu family and Wu Yang's luck was too good, but after only 3 days, the opportunity appeared. On the night of Kobayashi's departure, something happened that even Yang Qindong didn't expect. It didn't seem artificial at all, and the fact was that it was just a coincidence. The crown prince, Zhu Jianxin, was ill. As the only son of Zhu Qiyu and the future successor of the emperor, his headache and fever were also national affairs. Because the illness happened at night and was a little urgent, the imperial physician, Li Qing, was called to the East Palace. After taking the pulse, he gave a prescription. After the medicine was boiled and taken, the illness not only didn't get better, but also became worse. At first, it was just diarrhea, but later it became vomiting. This frightened the people who served here. The eunuchs first detained the imperial physician, Li Qing, and then reported the matter to the emperor, Zhu Qiyu, and Empress Hang. After receiving the news, Daizong and Empress Hang came to the East Palace with the imperial physician's office. Li Qing was also sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison to await punishment. Who was Li Qing? He wasn't as simple as an ordinary 8th-rank imperial physician. He had another identity, Yang Qindong's 5th brother-in-law, the Duke of Loyalty. As soon as something happened to Li Qing, the Li residents in the capital received the news. 5th sister Yang Qindong was even more anxious, and the first thing she thought of was her 6th brother, Yang Qindong. She hated that it was still dark and the news couldn't be spread. As soon as the sky brightened, The security bureau in the city sent the news, saying that her fifth brother-in-law, Li Qing, was imprisoned in the Ministry of Justice's prison. It was said that he had injured the crown prince, Zhu Jianxin, but the details of the matter still needed to be investigated. Prepare the carriage. Let's go to the capital. Yang Qindong's feelings for his fifth sister were still very good. He could guess that his fifth sister was probably very anxious at this time, so he decided to go to the capital personally to ask for an explanation. Chapter 318. Yang Qindong suddenly entered the capital and saw fifth sister's carriage at the Yongding gate. Immediately, Yang Qindong comforted fifth sister and asked her to return to the residence and wait. He would investigate everything and give her an explanation. With sixth brother taking action, Yang Li was naturally relieved. She also knew that it was not good for a woman to appear in public at this time, so she returned to the residence. At that time, many people saw the scene of the conversation, and the news quickly spread to all sides. When Yen Tao heard the news, he couldn't hide the joy on his face. The Duke of Loyalty suddenly entered the capital, so the security around him would not be as tight as usual. This was their opportunity. He immediately went straight to Qingshan Inn to inform Wu Yong to make preparations. At the same time, the Yu residents also received the news that the eldest grandson, Yu Yuanbi, quietly left the residence and went straight to the embroidered uniform guard. There were some elite soldiers who received money from the Yu family there, and now was the time to use them. After Yang Qindong entered the city, he went straight to the prison of the Ministry of Justice. The prison of the Ministry of Justice. 2 large stone lions stood majestically in front of the gate. Soldiers in armor stood in all directions. Constables in yamen uniforms could be seen walking back and forth from time to time, keeping an eye on the important criminals locked up here. This was another place to imprison serious criminals, second only to the imperial prison. In the great Ming dynasty, there were usually 3 places to imprison guilty people in the capital. The first was the imperial prison. Most of the people locked up there were people of high status, such as members of the imperial family or high-ranking officials. The second was the prison of the Ministry of Justice. Those who were locked up there were people of some status or who had committed serious crimes. The third was the prison of the Supreme Court. Relatively speaking, those who were locked up there were commoners who had committed minor crimes and did not have much of a background. As a place to imprison serious criminals, the level of defense here was naturally not low. If ordinary people wanted to enter to visit, in addition to having a warrant from the head of the Ministry of Justice, some rich people were willing to spend a lot of money to see the prisoner. However, the moment the luxurious carriage appeared here, these rules obviously did not apply. This was because the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Su Yozhin, had been waiting here for a long time. It wasn't Yang Qindong who gave him the order through the security bureau. It was all Su Yozhin's guess. Li Qing of the Imperial Academy of Medicine was the 5th brother-in-law of the Duke of Loyalty. Based on his understanding, it was impossible for the Duke to not show up. Her guess was correct. Su Yozhin couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when she saw the one-of-a-kind, luxurious carriage. What he was most worried about was that the loyal guild, who never suffered any losses, would forcefully break into the Ministry of Justice's prison. Moreover, this matter was related to the current crown prince. It was hard to predict what kind of consequences would arise. Fortunately, he still appeared here in advance. It seemed that some mistakes could be avoided. The carriage stopped and the curtain was opened by the accompanying tiger's mane. Yang Qindong appeared in front of the Ministry of Justice's prison. Su Yozhin, who was standing on the steps, quickly walked over and said, "This official greets the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. May I know why you are in such a hurry?" With his back facing the crowd, Su Yozhin faced Yang Qindong and tried his best to blink a few times, as if to remind him of something. Yang Qindong's face showed a trace of satisfaction at Su Yozhin's appearance. as expected of an important figure in history. His ability to grasp people's hearts was not low. Since the other party was standing here, it would be easier for him to do some things. So it is Assistant Minister Su. This Duke wants to see Li Qing of the Imperial Academy of Medicine. Please make it convenient. Ah, this. Su Yozhin's face was somewhat bitter. He had already given him a hint. How could the High Duke still say such things? As if he knew what Su Yozhin was thinking. Yang Qindong actually laughed. Then he walked forward and closed the distance between them. At the same time, he said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, I just want to understand the situation. I won't break into the prison and won't cause any trouble. Don't worry. When the voice reached Su Yozhin's ears, a trace of doubt appeared on his face. Was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage really going to be reasonable this time? Was he really going to take Li Qing away after seeing him? At this moment he was somewhat doubtful. In fact, Su Yozhin was being too careful to measure the heart of a gentleman. Because of his military accomplishments and the fact that he had beaten up the Japanese envoy, it was easy for people to have preconceived notions. In fact, Yang Qindong had always been very reasonable. Since Yang Qindong said to be at ease, he must know the importance of this matter. As such, Su Yozhin could not say anything. In fact, even if the other party insisted on taking Li Qing away, there was not much he could do to stop him. Su Yozhin agreed. With the second-in-command of the Ministry of Justice's left assistant minister following him, the path to the Ministry of Justice's prison was naturally smooth. Soon they saw Li Qing, who was in a solitary cell. Li Qing looked to be in his early 30s. He was also born into a scholarly family. Because he was extremely passionate about medicine, he had studied it from a young age. He had quite a bit of success. Later on, through his family's connections, he entered the Imperial Hospital to take up a post. It was precisely because of his passion for medicine that even when he was in prison, the first thing he thought about was Zhu Jianxin's illness. His brows were tightly knitted, and he did not make a sound. It seemed like he was still thinking about the illness and did not take his current situation seriously at all. This is Empress Hang's imperial decree. The matter has not been investigated clearly yet, so no one is making things difficult for him. When they arrived outside the solitary cell, Su Yozhin wanted to dismiss the people beside him to give Yang Qindong and Li Qing a chance to be alone. There is no need for this. Yang Qindong raised his right hand slightly. His trip this time was just to visit a prisoner. It was not like he was doing anything shameful. There was no need to have the others leave at all. This would instead easily cause others to make unfounded guesses. At the same time, it would also have an adverse effect on Su Yozhin. Su Yozhin did not allow the others to leave. Just as he was wondering what Yang Qindong was going to do, he squatted down. He squatted down and looked at Li Qing, who was behind the iron door, and asked, "Fifth brother-in-law, what exactly is going on? Also, how is the Crown Prince's illness? Can you tell me about it?" "Oh, Qindong is here." Li Qing, who had been meditating, was interrupted by Yang Qindong's voice. Only then did he realize where he was. He couldn't help but bitterly smile and say, "It is rare for the loyal Duke to come and see me. I am endlessly grateful." "Okay, fifth brother-in-law, let's talk about serious matters. What is going on with the Crown Prince's illness?" Yang Qindong did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. All of this was seen by Su Yozhin. He could not help but admire Li Qing's character. Just now, when he first called out Qindong Lai, it was clear that he did not realize where he was. He only thought that it was because he was greeting someone at home. However, when he found out that he was in a prison cell, he was not too surprised. Instead, he expressed his gratitude. If he was the one being thrown into prison, he definitely wouldn't be able to maintain his composure. While thinking this, Su Yozhin noticed that at this moment, Li Qing was really telling Yang Qindong about the Crown Prince's illness. He was speechless in his heart. What was going on? Shouldn't they be asking who Li Qing had offended and who he suspected of being framed by? What was the point of talking about his illness now? It was clear that Su Yozhin was judging others by his own standards. He believed that there must be someone framing him for this to happen. However, Yang Qindong had already thought it through. Perhaps it was because of the illness, which was why he asked about medicine. Li Qing was a knowledgeable person. He was especially knowledgeable when it came to medicine. If it was about other things, perhaps he could stay silent for a long time. However, when it came to professional matters, he spoke with assurance and spoke about Zhu Jianqin's illness. Diarrhea, abdominal pain, bloating, nausea, vomiting, headache, fever. After a stool test, it was yellow and watery. I've already written a prescription, but considering the Crown Prince's young age and poor health, I didn't dare to use too much. I only used half of the usual amount. But who would have thought that his illness would worsen and he would vomit? This is all my fault. I'm really speechless. Li Qing spoke for a long time. There were many words that Su Yozhin did not understand. However, when he looked at Yang Qindong, he stood there and nodded as if he understood. Okay, I understand. How about this? You stay here and don't make a fuss. I will make sure that nothing happens to you. After finally understanding the truth, Yang Qindong had some guesses in his heart. After comforting Li Qing, he turned to Su Yozhin and said seriously, "My fifth brother-in-law is here. If he is treated unnaturally, your Ministry of Justice should know the consequences." "Loyal Duke, don't worry. Our Ministry of Justice does things based on evidence." With someone watching, Su Yozhin naturally spoke with an official tone. That would be for the best. Yang Qindong nodded and left with large strides. At the entrance of the Ministry of Justice, he re-entered the luxurious carriage. However, the carriage did not leave for a long time. Su Yozhin, who was waiting to see him off, was puzzled. Su Yozhin did not understand what Yang Qindong was doing. Just as he was about to ask, the curtain of the carriage was opened again. Yang Qindong appeared with a box in his hand. "Give this to the Crown Prince. His illness should be under control. Take it." Tiger's Mane handed the box to Su Yozhin. Yang Qindong's voice sounded again. "I will not leave the capital. If the effect is not good, your Majesty can send people to arrest me. However, if he does not dare to take this medicine and does not trust me, then don't blame me for reasoning with him." After saying this, the curtain of the carriage was lowered again. Su Yozhin stood there with a puzzled expression. Chapter 319. However, since Yang Qindong had said so, what else could Su Yozhin do? She could only nod her head and head back to the palace. In the carriage, Yang Qindong sighed. After hearing Li Qing's words, he went into the large warehouse to investigate and found out that Zhu Jianqin was suffering from viral enteritis. This illness was naturally not a serious illness in the future, but in the past it could have been fatal. Thinking back, Zhu Jianqin's early death might have had something to do with this. This matter was not complicated, and it was not that the imperial physicians were not skilled. It was just that the Crown Prince's illness came too quickly. In addition, he was a child and had a weak body. If strong medicine could not be used, it might harm the body and cause a greater rebound. People would always say that many times the imperial physicians were not as good as some barefoot doctors when it came to treating illnesses. This was actually a misconception. To be able to enter the imperial hospital, which one of them did not have real skills, after going through layers of selection, and their family background was clean? The reason why some illnesses were not as good as the treatment methods of the country doctors was because the patients they faced were either rich or noble. These people had a common problem, and that was that life was very precious. For example, if they had the same illness, if they were ordinary people, it was fine if they died, but if they survived, it would be a skill that could make them famous. The barefoot doctors could naturally do things without restrictions. Sometimes they even came to treat patients with experimental methods. However, in the imperial hospital, it was completely different. They first had to ensure that they did not make any mistakes and protect themselves. In this kind of environment, it was fine if they did not do well, but they could not mess things up. Most of the time, they used conservative methods. Some small illnesses would not be cured quickly due to various misgivings, and it was not uncommon for it to become a serious illness. What was Zhu Jianxin's status? The crown prince. He was the future emperor. In addition, his birth mother was Empress Hang, the eldest son of the first wife, and the only son of the substitute emperor, Zhu Qiyu. His importance could be seen. There really wasn't the slightest bit of accident or carelessness. Li Qing was a good example to learn from. Li Qing's matter also rang an alarm bell for the other imperial physicians. What if his body couldn't take it and there were side effects? There was no need for that. Ordinary methods were too slow to take effect, and it was normal for new situations to occur at any time. As a result, they were all hesitant and wanted to decline. In the face of such a situation, Zhu Qijin was naturally enraged. He even threatened that if anything happened to his son, he would find trouble with these imperial physicians. But even so, no one would take the initiative to stand out and cause trouble. Most of the time, it was one thing to be punished passively, but it was another thing to take the initiative to take responsibility and look for trouble. It was at this moment that Su Yozhen arrived. He brought the medicine that Yang Qindong had given him. It was a small box with a strange packaging. Inside it was a long red and white pill. In fact, it was just the most common enteritis calming capsule in the future. Through Li Qing's description and his confident tone, Yang Qindong had a rough understanding of his condition. After entering the carriage, he flashed into the large warehouse. After another round of investigation, he confirmed that the crown prince Zhu Jianxin was most likely suffering from viral enteritis. Then he took out the medicine for the illness. The existence of the large warehouse was an unlimited cheating device. Anything that was placed inside would never expire. This was also Yang Qindong's greatest reliance. After Su Yozhen received the capsule, he came all the way to the imperial palace. It would be a lie to say that he did not have any suspicions or speculations. But when he thought of how much effort and money the Duke of Loyalty had spent on him, if something happened to him, it would not be in the other party's interest. When he thought of Yang Qindong's strange methods, he finally chose to believe him. Of course, he could only be responsible for delivering the capsule. As for whether the emperor would let Zhu Jianxin take it, that was something he could not do. In the imperial palace, the imperial physician's self-protection made Zhu Qiyu furious. As soon as Su Yozhen appeared and presented him with the medicine, he saw a turning point. He immediately ordered a few imperial physicians to study the medicine to see if it was poisonous. He even purposely had a eunuch take the medicine. After ensuring that there was no danger, he finally gave it to the crown prince. The medicine started to take effect. The crown prince did not feel as uncomfortable and fell into a deep sleep. Several imperial physicians came forward to check his pulse and confirmed that his condition had improved a lot. At this moment, Zhu Qiyu finally let out a sigh of relief. Good, beloved official Su has done a meritorious service by presenting the medicine. Reward. Zhu Qiyu, who was in a good mood, looked at Su Yozhen and was particularly pleasing to the eye. With a putong sound, Su Yozhen knelt on the ground. He hurriedly explained in detail that the medicine was delivered by the Duke of Loyalty. He also emphasized the matter of Li Qing from the imperial hospital. With meritorious service, no one would push it away. However, Yang Qindong was still waiting for news in front of the Ministry of Justice's prison. At this moment, how could Su Yozhen dare to be greedy? Zhu Qiyu stood there and quietly listened to everything. After the matter was clear, he couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. He originally thought that the medicine was a folk prescription that Su Yozhen had obtained. In addition, the matter was urgent, so he did not ask too much. Now that he knew that it was done by Yang Qindong, he was worried that this medicine that he had never seen before might have other side effects. After all, the crown prince had an accident. When he was in danger, there was no one to inherit his mantle. If Yang Qindong was suspected of rebelling, doing things like this was not impossible. He had some doubts in his heart. After all, Yang Qindong's power had long created a situation where his meritorious service shocked the emperor. Logically speaking, based on his meritorious service and the things he had done, it would not be excessive to give him the title of one of the three dukes. However, Zhu Qiyu did not do so. It was because his weakness could easily create a sharp contrast with the other party's strength. Fortunately, this Duke of Loyalty and Courage followed the rules. When he had nothing to do, he would do his best to be a teacher in the Yang family manner. He also rarely interacted with the important officials in court. As the emperor, he was very satisfied with this kind of method of not forming cliques. In order to compromise, as long as Yang Qindong did not do things too ostentatiously, he would also turn a blind eye. For example, when he beat up the Japanese envoy and wrestled with Minister Yushiriwa, he only reprimanded him. He did not do anything excessive. It seemed like the well water did not interfere with the river water, but in reality, both sides were secretly on guard. In this kind of environment, if Zhu Qiyu knew that the medicine was given by Yang Qindong, he probably would not dare to eat it. He did not reprimand Su Yozhin for not explaining the source of the medicine first, because Zhu Qiyu also knew that once she explained it clearly, the crown prince's condition would worsen. All right, Jin understands the matter. It seems that imperial physician Li Qing was wrongly accused this time. How about this? You release him and promote him by 1 rank. As Zhu Qiyu spoke, he waved his hand, indicating that Su Yozhin could leave. Yes, Your Majesty. After Su Yozhin agreed, she bowed and left. In his heart, he understood that this matter was over. He didn't reward Yang Qindong, who had taken out the medicine, because the emperor didn't want to have any more dealings with him. However, raising Wang Qing's rank was actually a gesture of goodwill. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage entered the city, and it seemed that he entered the city in a hurry, so there were not many guards around him. As soon as the news came out, head constable Yen Tao came to Qingshanin. In the past few days, Wu Yong had done a lot of things. With gold and silver and some connections with the Blackwater gang, he had found many Lulin experts. The famous ones were Copper Whip Wang Gui, Silver Spear Song Gang, Swimming Dragon Hand Li Zixing, and others. These people's martial arts were not low. They had stayed in the Black Well Street for a period of time because of a mishap and were taken care of by boss Hu Huaihai. It was because of this relationship that these people contacted Wu Yong in 2s and 3s under the promise of great benefits. Although the matter with the Blackwater gang had come to an end, Wu Yong still did not dare to move around in the capital during the day. When Yen Tao came to find him, he was lying on the bed to catch up on his sleep. However, when he heard the noise, he immediately stood up. When he got up, a short sword was already in his hand. It's me, don't be so nervous. I came to tell you that he entered the city and is now at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice's prison. There are only a dozen guards around him. Yen Tao's voice came in an extremely low volume. Then quickly became quiet again, giving people the feeling that this place had always been quiet. Wu Yong maintained the posture of holding the sword until there was no sound from the outside world. Then, as if he had woken up, his eyes flashed. Then he put on some makeup and quickly left Qingshanin. Although, with his status, it would be more dangerous to go out during the day, some opportunities were fleeting. If he did not seize them, he did not know when the next opportunity would come. As for Yen Tao, after leaving Qingshanin, he went to Yu Mansion again. This time it was easy for him to walk in. The person who received him was the eldest grandson of Yu Mansion, Yu Yuanbi. He had also received the news and was waiting for his arrival. Then, a large net covered Yang Qindong's head. However, before everything happened, it was still very calm, like the darkness before dawn. There was no wind, no rain, and no sunlight. In front of the Ministry of Justice's prison, Li Qing was released. He did not show any fear on his face. Perhaps it was because the time he spent in prison was too short and his attention was focused on his illness. Fifth sister Yang Qindong also rushed over in the Li family's carriage. When she picked up her husband, the two of them expressed their gratitude to Yang Qindong. In this regard, the sixth young Master Yang casually waved his hand, as if he did not care. Since they were family, he wouldn't be stingy when it came to helping out. Not to mention, Li Qing was indeed a talent, a professional talent. If he could gain more experience, he had already begun to consider whether or not he should bring him to his side. Chapter 320. After settling the matter, Yang Qindong naturally would not stay in front of the prison of the Ministry of Justice any longer. The carriage turned around and headed straight for the south of the city. Everything that happened here today was just a small interlude in Yang Qindong's eyes. It was not something to be taken seriously, but he did not know that there was a murderous plot waiting for him on the way back. The Yongding Gate was one of the gates that Yang Qindong used to return to the Yang village. They had passed through this place countless times, and even the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office were extremely familiar with this place. When they saw that one of the most luxurious carriages in the capital, they bowed from a distance to express the respect they felt for it. Every time this happened, the curtain of the carriage would be opened, revealing Yang Qindong's young, handsome, and calm face. He nodded slightly, which could be considered as a greeting to the soldiers. Just this small action made countless soldiers extremely excited. Their eyes shone with excitement. Speaking of which, Yang Qindong still had some influence in the army, and it was not small before. Just like after defeating the Walla army, it was easy for him to infiltrate the army with his influence. But he did not do so. Originally, he walked the path of the elite. Although this way, the early development would be very slow, the advantage was that he had a solid foundation. Yang Qindong also believed that with the passage of time, there would be a day when this army would grow stronger. At that time, it would be the time for them to rise to the top of the world. The carriage left the Yongding Gate and headed for the Yang village, 15 li away. In front of them, a group of 100 people was waiting in formation. They were lying on the side of the road, holding their breath and waiting for something. They were dressed in different clothes, and many of them were not familiar with each other. But this did not prevent them from gathering here, because they had a common goal, and that was to kill the Duke of Loyalty of the great Ming dynasty. The people of the Lulin did not follow any rules. They might go berserk and kill people because of sentence, but they might also fight because of a contemptuous look or fight over meaningless disputes. It was because of this that they were even more terrifying. And now, this group of terrifying people were gathered together. From this, it could be seen how powerful the person who attracted them was. That man was Wu Yong, the former second-in-command of the Blackwater Gang. He was lucky enough to survive. Back then, his mission was to ambush Yang Qindong halfway, but because he was detected too early, he failed in the end. This time, he took the same route as before, and even led these people to an ambush location not far from the previous ambush location. With this arrangement, he seemed to want to climb back up from where he fell. There were more than 100 heroes. All of them were Lulin people, and all of them had learned some martial arts. Among them, there were some who had made a name for themselves in Jianghu, such as Copper Whip Wang Gui, Silver Spear Song Gang, Roaming Dragon Hand Li Zixing, and so on. All of them had the ability to take on more than 10 people. If they were to encounter an ordinary man who relied on brute force, perhaps even 10 or 20 people would not be a match for them. Of course, Wu Yong was able to invite them because of the temptation of a large sum of money. Wu Yong said that after the matter was completed, the rewards would be very rich. However, at the same time, he also wanted to make a name for himself. In Jianghu, what mattered most was reputation and righteousness. The so-called reputation naturally referred to reputation and fame. Righteousness referred to the spirit of loyalty and righteousness that reached the clouds. Previously, during the bombardment of Black Well Street, who knew how many Lulin people were killed? These people roamed Jianghu all year round. so it was impossible for them not to have 2 or 3 friends. For example, among these 100 people, there were some who came with the intention of avenging the death of their old friends. There were also some who came for fame. If they could kill the Duke of Loyalty and Courage of the great Ming dynasty, presumably it would be awe-inspiring. From then on, their reputation in Jianghu would be even more resounding, and it would be easier for them to do things. With all kinds of thoughts, more than 100 people hid in the dense forest beside the road. Since they were experts who had learned martial arts, they naturally had the ability to hide and adjust their breath, so that from a distance, it was impossible to see anything wrong with this place compared to other places. Under everyone's expectant eyes, a luxurious carriage appeared, and a small guard team of more than a dozen people also appeared in everyone's line of sight. At this moment, an austere atmosphere unknowingly filled this dense forest. Affected by it, one's breathing unconsciously became heavier. If one's hearing was good, one would already be able to faintly hear the sound of slightly heavy breathing. The carriage approached from afar, 300 feet, 200 feet, 100 feet, 800 feet, 500 feet, 300 feet, 10 feet, 8 feet, 5 feet. As it got closer and closer, the faces of the guards could already be seen through the dense forest. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out, and then a figure seemed to descend from the sky. A long bronze whip smashed directly at the moving carriage. The wind was swift, and the rain was like thunder. Under this blow, it had the power to wipe out 1,000 soldiers. Caught off guard, the roof of the luxurious carriage was hit heavily, and the whole body of the carriage seemed to be smashed a lot. However, because the body of the carriage was really sturdy, it was pierced with one blow. The person who made the move was Copper Whip Wang Gui. He first hid in a big tree, and when the carriage passed by, he suddenly attacked from above. He wanted to split the carriage to reveal the target of this trip, but because he underestimated the sturdiness of the carriage, his attack failed. When the attack began, a whip fell from the sky, and the horn of the attack was blown. Figures rushed out from the dense forest, either holding swords, sabers, or spears. The speed of these people was very fast. The distance of 100 feet was covered in only 2 to 3 breaths. Before the dozen or so guards could react, they rushed towards the unique and luxurious carriage that represented an extraordinary meaning. Boom! A long spear flashing with silver light directly pierced into the carriage. The one who made the move was Silver Spear Songgang. After Copper Whip Wang Gui's attack failed, he used his own attack method. Clang! Just as the long spear was about to pierce into the carriage, a long saber came slashing over and struck the body of the silver spear, causing it to deviate slightly. The long spear that was supposed to enter through the curtain instead pierced the edge of the window, causing wood chips to fly into the air. Protect the young master. Beta Persei, who was holding the saber, had a very ugly expression on his face after the attack. Just from the exchange of blows just now, it seemed that he was not much better in terms of martial arts. There was no need for Beta Persei to shout anything else, as more than a dozen Lung Feng guards had already begun to draw their sabers to protect the carriage. They formed a group of 3, back to back, forming a circle. They stood on the side of the carriage, staring coldly at the people of the forest rushing in front of them. This was the 3-3 system taught by Yang Qindong. Once, this strategy was used to fight the United States Army during the war to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea. Now, it was used on the battlefield like an extension of one's arm. It was very useful and could be used to protect one's back and sides as much as possible in a chaotic battle. It allowed one to fight wholeheartedly without having to worry about other threats. As soon as the 3-3 system was used, although there were only more than a dozen Lung Feng guards, the 5 circles formed were very similar to one. This made the forest people, who were originally fighting separately, feel like they were impenetrable and impenetrable. Don't hold back. Finish off the target as soon as possible. Wu Yong also appeared in the crowd. His gaze only swept over the dozen Lung Feng guards before returning to the luxurious carriage. Intuition told him that these guards were very troublesome and difficult to deal with. Instead of fighting with them, it was better to directly kill Yang Qindong in the carriage. When the time came, things would naturally be much easier to deal with without a leader. With Wu Yong's appearance, the forest people who were originally fighting on their own became much more orderly. They began to approach the carriage step by step. At the same time, they also sent a portion of their men to surround the other 5 circles in other directions, using the tactic of holding back the guards. Quickly close in. Beta Persei saw that the opponents were closing in step by step, and shouted with a thunderous voice. His voice was already very loud to begin with, so this shout was like a sudden clap of thunder, directly shaking the ears of swimming dragon hand Li Zixing, who had just rushed over, to the point of buzzing. Li Zixing's footsteps were a little shaky because of this loud roar. Beta Persei, who used the roar similar to a lion's roar to disturb the enemy, immediately brandished his sword. He wanted to use this opportunity to cut down the people in front of him. The wind from the blade whistled and fell from the sky with a flash of light, drawing a beautiful arc. It was not until it was 20 centimeters away from Li Zixing's neck that it was forced to stop. It was a flashing silver spear, blocking the place where the blade fell. "I'll help you." The one who made the move was Silver Spear Songgang, just like how Beta Persei blocked his spear from entering the carriage. This time he also blocked Beta Persei's killing move against Li Zixing. The blade was blocked, and there was a very crisp sound of weapons clashing. This also let Li Zixing know what had happened. After a loud shout, he pushed out his palms and slammed them in front of Beta Persei. Even though Beta Persei was tall and strong, he did not dare to underestimate the two of them. He stepped back to ensure his own safety. Beta Persei was forced to retreat to the side. The situation did not seem good. Even the other 15 members of the Cold Front were beginning to be separated. They were in a team of 3, and they were facing a team of more than 10 people. Under the advantage of several times the manpower, they were like small boats sailing in the sea, with the possibility of capsizing at any time. In a situation where a crisis could occur at any time, they really did not have the opportunity to take out their guns and fire. The Cold Front were separated, and Beta Persei was forced to retreat to the side, leaving the front door of the carriage wide open. Only a hanging curtain was left hanging there, indicating that he was still very mysterious. "Go, open the curtain." Wu Yong came to the carriage with more than 10 of the forest's experts. When he thought of Yang Qindong's title as the war god, he did not know why, but at this moment there was a trace of fear in his heart. Chapter 321. The forest man pointed out by Wu Yong did not have so many taboos. Sometimes ignorance was blameless. He did not know how powerful Yang Qindong was, and was even a little excited that he could lift the curtain. Taking large strides forward, he placed the saber in his left hand and reached out his hand towards the area where the palanquin curtain was. Bang! The sound of a gunshot rang out, and the blade fell to the ground. A bloody hole appeared on the forehead of the greenwood man, and blood was flowing out of it. His eyes were wide open, showing the confusion and fear he had in the moment before he died. The man fell to the ground, and a strong smell of blood naturally came out and drilled into the nostrils of Wu Yong and the others. Hiss! Seeing the scene in front of him, Wu Yong could not help but suck in a breath of cold air, and at the same time he naturally took a step back. He knew that the loyal duke was not easy to kill, and now it seemed that it was indeed so. "Let's go together." But the hesitation only lasted for a moment, and Wu Yong made up his mind again. As the second brother of the Blackwater gang, he had naturally come into contact with the firearms of the great Ming dynasty before. He knew that although this thing was powerful, it had more problems. For example, it was only effective at close range, and it could only fire one shot at a time. But out of his cautious nature, he did not send people to try, but decided to swarm in. When the time came, how would the loyal Duke, who only had one firearm, deal with it? Initially, the gunshot had indeed frightened everyone. They were still thinking about what to do next, but Wu Yong's voice had already sounded. When he heard that everyone was going to attack together, he suddenly became spirited again. Perhaps this was human nature. When one person was afraid to do something because of fear, the fear seemed to disappear when everyone was together. Under Wu Yong's encouragement, more than a dozen people were divided into two groups. They formed a semicircle and closed in on the luxurious carriage. All kinds of weapons flashed coldly, and they were ready to kill at any time. The scene in front of the carriage made Beta Persei and the 15 Lung Feng brothers anxious. They tried to get closer, but they were all blocked by the forest people who had the advantage in numbers. Among them, Beta Persei had rushed too fiercely and did not take care of his own defense. His shoulder was hit by Li Zixing's swimming dragon hand, and his entire left arm felt numb. This was because he had been training for many years. If it was an ordinary person, they would not be able to fight back after being hit by this palm. No one could come to help. Yang Qindong, who was in the carriage, seemed to have fallen into a desperate situation. At least, that was what Wu Yong thought. In his opinion, Yang Qindong was only in his early 20s. Even some of the martial arts grandmasters and famous big shots would find it very difficult to rush out when facing a dozen or more opponents. Big brother, third brother, this brother is going to avenge you, Wu Yong muttered in his heart. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. At this moment, it was as if he wanted to chop off Yang Qindong's head as a sacrifice for his brothers. The forest people approached step by step. The nearest person was already within arm's reach of the carriage's curtain. That person held the long sword in his hand and swung it forward. He wanted to cut off the curtain to provide enough support for his and his brother's vision. For a moment, everyone's eyes were focused on the long sword, as if they wanted to see what kind of vision the sword would bring when it was swung down. They also wanted to see if the young loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty, whom they had identified as their target, was really that powerful. Did he really have 3 heads and 6 arms? Bang! Another gunshot rang out, accompanied by the scene of the forest man holding the sword falling to the ground. This gunshot also caused the other forest men to involuntarily take a step back. Obviously, they were very wary of this flintlock. Don't be afraid. He only has 1 flintlock. If we attack together, he won't be able to do anything. Wu Yong saw that the morale of his men was shaken, so he immediately shouted loudly. As he looked around, he saw Copper Whip Wang Gui and the others besieging a 3-man cold vanguard squad. Under the wave of the Copper Whip, the 3-man squad was indeed in a very difficult situation. There were even different wounds on the 3 men's bodies. However, the formation was really special. At the very least, it was useful for defense. It actually caused the forest men, who outnumbered them by several times, to be unable to find a suitable opportunity to attack in a short period of time. Since it didn't work immediately, Wu Yong shouted loudly, "Brother Wang, please come help!" "Oh, how is it? Why hasn't the carriage been opened yet?" Wang Gui, who was attracted by the shout, stood beside Wu Yong. His voice seemed to be concerned, but in reality, it was filled with a sense of superiority. He was thinking about the uselessness of these people. With so many people, they couldn't even deal with a stopped carriage. It was really difficult to look up to them. "Yes, it hasn't been opened yet. It seems that we still need Brother Wang's copper whip." Wu Yong was very good at manipulating people. Naturally, he could see Wang Gui's arrogance. However, it didn't matter. He would just satisfy the other party. At most, he would say a few nice words. It wasn't like he would lose anything. Sure enough, after hearing Wu Yong's flattering words, Wang Gui laughed heartily. "Fine, since Brother Wu has said so. Then I have no choice but to make a move. Come, All of you, get out of the way. Watch me directly shatter that curtain. Wang Gui, who was laughing, placed the 7-section copper whip on the ground. The other forest men also tactfully retreated to the side. The power of the 2 spears was truly frightening. They couldn't figure out what was inside the carriage, and they didn't even know when to dodge at the crucial moment. It was better to let Wang Gui use his copper whip to lift the curtain. The forest men obeyed and retreated to the side. However, from the way they stood, they still faintly surrounded the carriage. It seemed that they were only waiting for their field of vision to widen so that they could charge forward and finish off their target. Under everyone's gaze, Wang Gui raised his right arm. The veins on his arm were already bulging at this moment. The 7-section copper whip followed a loud whistling sound as it smashed towards the huge curtain of the luxurious carriage. As expected of the copper whip, this time Wang Gui's attack was very accurate. With just one strike, it hit the horse curtain. With a twist and a pull, the originally heavy curtain flew up along with the copper whip. At this moment, the figure of the person in the luxurious carriage was clearly imprinted in everyone's line of sight. A green robe with a calm face. There wasn't the slightest hint of nervousness or urgency from being surrounded. This was the first impression that Yang Qindong gave everyone. As expected of the Duke of Loyal and Courageous, Wu Yong had once been fortunate enough to see Yang Qindong on the street. Although it was still far away, he could still recognize him. At this moment, when he saw that the person in the carriage was the target that he wanted to take his life, he couldn't help but excitedly shout out. Just as Wu Yong's shout fell, Yang Qindong in the carriage sighed. "That's right. I am the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. However, I don't know what enmity I have with you. Why must you take my life? You've killed countless people. Do I need a reason to kill you?" At this moment, Wu Yong really wanted to tell Yang Qindong how his big brother and third brother were killed. However, considering that a long delay might lead to trouble, he decisively chose to give up. Instead, he held a ghost knife in his hand and pointed at Yang Qindong. "Kill him. Whoever kills him will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of silver." 1,000 taels of silver was enough for an ordinary family of 3 to live for the rest of their lives. Even for the forest people who spent money extravagantly, it was a huge sum of money. As the saying goes, people die for wealth. As the shout fell, 4 or 5 figures had already rushed out. Their target was Yang Qindong, who was sitting in the carriage. They could already see clearly. "Kill!" The 5 figures shouted in unison. It seemed like they were cheering for themselves, but also seemed like they were raising their voices. "Sigh, you're forcing me to kill." In the carriage, Yang Qindong sighed softly. Chapter 322. A volley of bullets shot out, and the first row of 5 greenwood warriors closest to the carriage fell to the ground with their eyes wide open, as though they were unable to rest in peace. Yang Qindong smacked his lips and shook his head. "I already said you guys forced me to kill. Since I've already killed, I'll continue to kill." Suo Qindong seemed to be looking for an excuse for himself. After he finished speaking, he raised his gun and aimed it at the other forest warriors surrounding the carriage. "Run!" Wu Yong immediately noticed that the pitch-black muzzle was raised. Out of instinct, he shouted to run, but his body took the initiative to hide behind Copper Whip Wang Gui. This person's stature was similarly tall and could be Wu Yong's first shield. Not everyone had Wu Yong's intelligence. The moment the continuous gunshots rang out, who knew how many people were completely dumbfounded. The sudden appearance of a firearm that wasn't a firearm and a concealed weapon that wasn't a concealed weapon and possessed such great lethality. For a moment, many people's minds became blank. When Yang Qindong raised his gun and fired again, they were like fixed targets, allowing the bullets to hit their bodies. They didn't even know how to dodge. Continuous gunshots rang out, and the 5 forest warriors closest to the carriage fell to the ground with blood all over their bodies. Then the muzzle shifted, and the black muzzle once again spewed out a red light, aiming at those forest warriors who were still in a daze and at a loss of what to do. The copper whip was propped up on the ground, and Wang Gui's old face was already wrinkled together. He had roamed the underworld for more than 30 years, and believed that he had seen and heard many things, but everything that happened in front of him was still beyond his imagination. He never even thought that there would be such a thing today. When Yang Qindong moved the gun towards him, he was still standing there in a daze. Then gunshots rang out, and Wang Gui, who had been shot 3 times in the chest, naturally fell backward. But he only fell backwards and didn't really fall down. Wu Yong, who was hiding behind him, supported him. So, a dazzling firework soared into the sky, which was suddenly released from Wu Yong's hand. He thought of what Yan Tao had said to him. If things were difficult, he still had a backup plan. At that time, he could catch the Duke of Loyalty in one fell swoop. Previously, he had almost forgotten about this matter. Now that he didn't know if the fireworks would have any effect, he could only wait for the results. It didn't matter if he died, but if he couldn't kill Yang Qindong, even if he died, he wouldn't have the face to see his big brother and third brother. With Wang Gui dead, the Greenwood man who was walking in front of the carriage and preparing to attack also woke up and began to rapidly retreat. In this regard, Yang Qindong did not chase after them, nor did he shoot. Instead, he looked at these people nervously, as if he would not shoot if they did not force him. The moment the gunshots rang out, Beta Persei also took the opportunity to withdraw from the battlefield. He avoided the entanglement of Silver Spear Songgang and Dragon Hand Li Zixing and returned to the carriage. The other 5 3-man teams were also moving closer to the carriage, with a look of vigilance on their faces. Why did he stop fighting? Silver Spear Songgang walked to Wu Yong's side and asked with a frown when he saw the bodies of more than a dozen of his companions on the ground. Maybe there aren't many bullets left in his gun. Wu Yong shook his head and said in an uncertain tone, "Then what are we waiting for? Since there aren't many bullets left, let's just swarm him and see how many of our brothers he can kill." Dragon Hand Li Zixing had a ruthless expression on his face. Obviously, as a famous master in Jianghu, it would be too embarrassing if they couldn't even kill a target of more than a dozen people with the power of hundreds of people. As soon as Li Zixing finished speaking, he received a few supercilious looks. It was as if they wanted to charge at him. Although it was true that these people were from the Jianghu, they were also known as the heroes of the forest by others. Some of them had even committed murder, giving people the impression that they were extremely vicious. However, there was one thing that could not be changed, and that was that they were still very afraid of death deep down in their bones. Otherwise, they could have swarmed him together instead of fighting and probing him. After speaking, Li Zixing knew that everyone was looking down on him, so he didn't speak anymore with a red face. After all, his words just now were a bit impulsive. It was normal for him to receive supercilious looks from others. On the other hand, Silver Spear Songgang couldn't help but ask, "Brother Wu, then what are we doing here?" "Waiting." This time, Wu Yong's tone was incomparably firm. Just now, the signal of fireworks had been released. Next, it was time to see what Yan Tao's backup plan was. He hoped that it wouldn't disappoint him. Wu Yong and the others didn't run. They just fled and didn't fight. They just faintly formed a fan and blocked the way. In this regard, Yang Qindong and the others didn't charge or retreat, nor did they shoot. It was as if they were waiting for something. The only difference was that Wu Yong's expression was relatively calm. Under Yang Qindong's calm appearance, there would occasionally be a hint of anxiety in his eyes. Time passed by minute by minute. After about a quarter of an hour, a heavy sound came from the ground. The first thing that resonated was the sudden neighing of the war horses pulling the luxurious carriage. A group of horses is coming. The sudden movement caused the 2 sides to become restless. Everyone couldn't help but look in the direction of the capital, wanting to see who was coming. Some of the mercenaries were even prepared to run. They were just here to earn some extra money. They didn't want to lose their lives here. As for whether they could escape or not, they were still confident in being surrounded by dense forests. The sound of the horses behind them was getting closer and closer. Yang Qindong, who was sitting in the carriage, suddenly relaxed. With a wave of his right hand, he took out a brand new magazine and inserted it into the machine. Not only him, Beta Persei, and the other 15 members of the Cold Front also took out the spears on their backs and began to check their equipment. All these movements were so skillful and natural. Wu Yong suddenly had a bad feeling when he saw the way they acted, as if there was no one else around. Could it be that the other party has something to rely on? Or is it that, while I'm waiting, the other party is also waiting? This thought only flashed through Wu Yong's mind for a moment before disappearing. In the end, he knew too little about firearms. If it had been an opponent like Shiheng, he would have already fled to God knows where the moment the squad opened fire with the machine gun. Wu Yong, who still had the advantage in numbers, was still hoping that this group of horses might be reinforcements from the loyal Duke. Otherwise, why would the other party be so calm? However, he didn't know what the other party would do after he released the fireworks. The two sides were still in a standoff. The outline of the horse group behind them was gradually becoming clearer. After some time, it finally appeared in front of everyone. It was a group of horses dressed entirely in black. From a distance, it looked like there were about 50 of them. In ancient times, war horses were very rare and expensive, especially in the Central Plains. Most of the war horses needed to be purchased from the northern grasslands. As time passed, the price would often increase by a few times. To be able to take out 50 war horses at once, it was obvious that this person's identity was extraordinary. Ha ha ha, they're all here. The horse group was getting closer and closer until they stopped about 100 steps away from Yang Qindong. At this distance, it was already within the range of an arrow. At that time, an arrow could be shot about 130 steps away. At this distance, even an ordinary bow and arrow could have a considerable lethality. At such a close distance, the carriage might only need to charge down and tear Yang Qindong and the others to pieces. The leader of the horse group, who was actually a young man, seemed to know this result and reason. He laughed heartily. Yang Qindong narrowed his eyes for a moment when the person greeted him so enthusiastically. Obviously, he didn't recognize the other party. It was only when Yang Er leaned forward and whispered something that he nodded, as if he suddenly realized something. So it's young Master Yu. I really didn't expect that the person behind today's big battle was actually you. The person who came was Yu Yuanbi, the eldest grandson of Minister Yu Shiyue of the Ministry of Justice. He was also the backup that Yan Tao mentioned. That day, Yan Tao went to the Yu mansion to seek an audience with Minister Yu. He said that Wu Yong wanted to deal with Yang Qindong. As one of the chief constables, how could Yan Tao not know about the enmity between Minister Yu and the Duke of Loyalty? Even the third young master, Yu Xiong, had died because of this. This was an irreconcilable enmity. Perhaps Yan Tao knew that it was unrealistic to rely on Wu Yong to deal with Yang Qindong. Or perhaps he was optimistic about Yu Shiyue's position and wanted to climb up. In short, he told him everything about Wu Yong. He even made another decision. Even if Minister Yu did not want to deal with Yang Qindong, he could also kill Wu Yong and send his head to Minister Yu. This could be considered a merit. However, how could Yu Shiyue not see that there was a death feud between him and Yang Qindong? Because his grandson, who was the third in line, had been executed, many officials in the Ministry of Justice looked at him differently now. There was also the newly promoted left assistant minister, Su Yojin, who took advantage of this to gain a lot of power. The Ministry of Justice was no longer in the era where he had the final say. All of this was because of Yang Qindong. If this person died, he would still be put in an important position because of the emperor's favor, and the Yu family would be able to regain its former glory. He understood this in his heart, but how could he kill Yang Qindong? Could he kill him? What would the situation be if he killed him? These were all things that Yu Shuriwa had to think about. Just like Yang Qindong, he naturally had the ability to kill any important minister. But why didn't he do so? It was because he had a lot of scruples. The safety of the important ministers was not guaranteed. Once it became a situation where everyone was in danger, these people might join hands to deal with him. Chapter 3:23. After all, officialdom had its own rules. You could use open schemes, or even framing and framing. However, you couldn't directly go up to someone's door. That would only show that you were rude and had no standards. More importantly, this kind of straightforward method was not what scholars liked. It would be looked down upon by everyone, and everyone would be on guard against it. If that happened, it would be difficult to develop any further. When the opportunity was right, everyone would be in danger, and it was not impossible for them to gang up on him. However, was Yang Qindong a scholar? He wrote a good poem and was very talented in music. He was a scholar at a young age and was conferred the title of High Scholar by the Daizong Emperor. He even opened his own school and was a descendant of one of the three Yangs. It seemed that no matter his background or experience, he could be considered a member of the literati. However, his actions of leading troops to war and flourishing business were different from other literati. Therefore, it was really a matter of opinion whether he was a literati or not. If Yang Qindong was not a scholar, then there was a chance to kill 100 people. It was a way to solve the problem. Yen Tao's arrival made Yu Shuriwa's heart move. However, the other party was only a small official, so he left the matter to his eldest grandson, Yu Yuanbi. Firstly, it could be used to train him. Secondly, if something really happened, he could hide behind him and help clean up the mess. In the end, although Yang Qindong had the title of duke, he was still too young. Offering potatoes to start his career could be attributed to luck. Saving Yingzong and retreating from the Walla was also the work of the mercenaries. What really happened to Yang Qindong didn't seem to be anything special. Yu Yuanbi naturally saw hope when Yu Shuriwa let go of the matter. Compared to his grandfather's indifference, he quickly became familiar with Yen Tao and thought of several plans to assassinate Yang Qindong. However, no one expected that Yang Qindong would suddenly enter the city because of Li Qing. This sudden change also caught Yu Yuanbi off guard. After meeting up with Yen Tao, the two of them thought that the opportunity had come. They immediately notified Wu Yong to make preparations. Yu Yuanbi, on the other hand, went to the embroidered uniform guards and found an expert who was close to him. If things didn't go well, he would be the backup attack. However, no one knew that because he wanted to make things perfect, he gave himself away. Coincidentally, when Yu Yuanbi was mobilizing his troops, he was discovered by Tang Tong, who was sleeping in his room. He vaguely heard his colleagues say that young Master Yu invited him to the south of the city. Tang Tong, who was still in a daze, jumped up. The relationship between the Duke of Loyalty and the Minister of the Ministry of Justice was not good. Everyone in the court knew that there was a great enmity between them. Even some of the people below had heard some rumors. As a member of the embroidered uniform guard, Tang Tongz's master, not only that, his life was saved by Yang Qindong, so he naturally paid more attention to his benefactor's matters. When Tang Tong heard the news, he got up, put on his clothes, and went straight to a tea house outside the embroidered uniform guard's residence. He knew that the owner of the tea house was a spy under the Duke of Loyalty. Thus, after Yang Qindong left the Yongding Gate, people from the Security Bureau caught up with him and gave him information. After getting the information in advance, Tiger's Man and Beta Persei advised him to stop and wait until he returned to the city to transfer Commander Tung Shan's Lung Fong and the Security Bureau's Wolf Fong action team before returning to the Yang village. However, all of this was rejected by Yang Qindong. In his words, it was a blessing, not a curse. Not to mention, they had already gotten the information in advance. They only needed to prepare more, and there would be nothing to worry about. Since they wanted to deal with him, he naturally had to fight back. In order to prevent others from making irresponsible remarks, he needed irrefutable evidence. Thus, there was the scene in front of him, where Yang Qindong, Yu Yuanbi, and Wu Yong met. At this moment, Yang Qindong, who was surrounded from two sides, didn't seem to be in a good situation. Especially when Yu Yuanbi smiled and waved his hand, the 50 elite cavalrymen he brought all took out exquisite military bows and crossbows. It almost sealed the opponent's victory. Military bows and crossbows not only had a long range, but were also relatively accurate. The cost of such things wasn't low, and often only the most elite troops were equipped with them. But now, they actually appeared behind Yu Yuanbi. When Yang Qindong saw this scene, his expression changed slightly. What a powerful method! I don't think you have this ability. It must be your grandfather who helped you. After all, to be able to take out such a good bow and crossbow, the average Ministry of War official's ability would be insufficient. Only those above the 4th rank could barely do it. Haha, you don't have to worry about that. Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Yu Yuanbi laughed proudly. I've long heard that Duke of Loyalty and Courage can kill people with a wave of your finger and repel the Walla army with a wave of your hand. But I don't know how you're going to solve such a small situation today. Or can you still wave your hand and conquer the world? Oh, are you interested in this matter? Yang Qindong's voice came out in time. The tension on his face eased a lot, and he looked at Yu Yuanbi with interest. Originally, Yu Yuanbi wanted to use this opportunity to ridicule Yang Qindong. It had been proven that those things were done by the mercenaries in private. He just waved his hand. How could there be any sorcery? Who would die with a wave of his hand? Yu Yuanbi wanted to ridicule him, but now Yang Qindong actually accepted it. It seemed that he still wanted to show off. This made Yu Yuanbi have a bad feeling in his heart. But soon he shook his head and threw the uneasiness in his heart to the back of his mind. This operation was so sudden that even he didn't prepare in advance. How could Yang Qindong know about it? He must be saying this to scare him. Yes, to scare him. As if seeing through Yang Qindong's plot, Yu Yuanbi laughed. What a Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Are you still thinking of stalling for time at this time? Come on, get ready. Yu Yuanbi should have been afraid, but Yang Qindong's expression was too calm, giving Yu Yuanbi an extremely bad feeling. He wanted to get this matter over with as soon as possible. Following his shout, Wu Yong and the other mercenaries also raised the weapons in their hands. The mercenaries who had been frightened by the gunshots a moment ago were reinvigorated by Yu Yuanbi's arrival and those exquisite crossbows. They might not have been able to face difficulties head-on, but they had no problem beating down a drowning dog. HAA, why don't you believe me? Seeing that Yu Yuanbi was about to lose control and make a move, Yang Qindong shook his head slightly and casually extended a finger. If Hu Yan and the others were here, they would have definitely noticed that this gesture was very similar to the one he had used to point at the traitor eunuch, Ning, on the walls of the capital. It was also this finger that caused Yu Yuanbi, who was still riding on his horse, to feel pain all over his body. He fell off his horse with a plop. Yu Yuanbi fell off his horse with a casual finger strike. At this moment, the other black-clothed men were all stunned on the spot. Not only them, but even their allies Wu Yong and the others, who were standing on the opposite side, also widened their eyes in disbelief. Some of the mercenaries might have heard too many stories, and they even thought that this was the one Yang finger of the Loyal and Courage Guild. Why did a single finger have the effect of killing people from a distance? They were all stunned, but Yang Qindong was not stunned. Beta Persei and his 15 subordinates were also not stunned. Attack! A roar came from his mouth, and then the loaded bullets flew toward the 50 men in black. The sudden sound of gunfire and Yu Yuanbi falling off his horse caused the entire cavalry to fall into chaos. Most of them were shot down from their horses by the first wave of gunfire. Only a very small number of people fired their crossbows at the surroundings of the carriage, but they also lost their aim from far away. After the first wave of crossbow fire, a few of the men in black turned around and ran. But when he turned around, he discovered that there was another group of horses behind him. Although there weren't many of them, the leader was none other than Ming. They held a black Type 95 submachine gun in their hands and attacked head-on. No matter how powerful a cold weapon was, when faced with a hot weapon from a distance, the advantage would be lost. The so-called experts in TV shows and movies could soar into the air and dodge bullets, but that was pure nonsense. Such a thing might happen, but it was usually because the shooter's marksmanship was not good enough. But those who could follow Yang Qindong were all elites of the cold front. To be able to become a qualified cold vanguard, which one of them hadn't been fed countless bullets to become one. The munitions factory in Crimson City could already produce enough bullets. If they could not reach the level of a sharpshooter, then they did not have the right to call themselves Cold Front. With the appearance of Tiger, Ming, and the first guard, Captain Xiuvi, it was destined that none of the men in black would be able to escape. Yang Qindong and the others gave up on the battlefield and turned to look at Wu Yong and the others. The moment the gunshots rang out, Wu Yong and the others were already scared out of their wits. If Yang Qindong was the only one with a gun, they could still fight. After all, firearms were not things that could be fired forever and needed to be reloaded. This was their chance to charge and attack. But when they saw that it was not only Yang Qindong, but the other brothers also raised their guns and fired and spat out red flames, the last bit of hope in their hearts disappeared. Everyone wanted to escape and leave this place. They did not want to be enemies with these unknown firearms in the future. Chapter 324. The mercenaries decisively turned around and left. Wu Yong knew that something big was about to happen. Even if he stayed behind to charge, he would only be risking his life. With a trace of reluctance in his heart, he turned around and followed everyone into the dense forest on both sides. Puff, puff, puff. Sniper rifles with silencers began to fire, and the ghost sniper was fired. During the quarter of an hour when Yang Qindong and Wu Yong confronted each other, they received orders and completed the hidden mission of preparing to attack. Now it was time for them to kill in all directions. Not only was there the ghost sniper team, but this time even the Wolf Fong action team, temporarily stationed in the security bureau, had been waiting in the dense forest for a long time. They were waiting for these self-proclaimed mercenaries to barge in and give them a head-on blow. This was the strongest force that Yang Qindong could transfer in a short period of time. Perhaps it would not be easy to leave the scores of more than 100 people behind, but at least he could kill most of them and let them make a name for himself. Endless slaughter unfolded in the forest. Every gunshot could mean the loss of a life. Every scream could mean the end of a life. Yang Qindong did not look at the forest. He got off the carriage, and under the protection of Beta Persei and the others, he strode to Yuanbi, who was lying on the ground with a gunshot in his leg. "Save me, save me." Yuanbi, who was still arrogant just now, was now pale. It was caused by excessive blood loss and excessive shock. "Don't worry, you won't die, at least not yet," Yang Qindong said coldly. He squatted down and then touched the muzzle of the gun in his leg with his right hand. It looked like he was checking the injury, but when he was about to touch the wound, he used more strength. Under the force, Yuanbi could not help but howl. "Pain, pain." "Now that you know how painful it is, tell me, who else wants to murder me other than you? Does your grandfather know?" Yang Qindong wanted to get the evidence as soon as possible, and he also wanted to keep an eye on the people involved. Since they wanted to assassinate him, they had to be prepared for a backlash. Yuanbi's face was dripping with sweat, and his facial features were scrunched together. However, he also knew that he could not betray his grandfather. Otherwise, there would be no hope at all. But looking at Yang Qindong's face, if he didn't say something, it would be impossible for him to pass. So he suppressed the pain and said, "And Chief Constable Yen Tao, he informed me that the remaining members of the Black Water Gang wanted to harm you, so I wanted to avenge my third brother. Yen Tao, catch him. Finally, Yang Qindong heard some useful information. Only then did he loosen his grip that was like a vice. Just as he finished speaking, a member of the Cold Vanguard team, who was in charge of delivering the news, rode towards the city. In the dense forest, the originally quiet scene was no longer there, and it was replaced by the smell of blood, just as Yang Qindong had expected. Under their hasty preparations, they did not manage to take down all of the forest men. About a dozen of them managed to escape. Among them, the leader, Wu Yong, and Li Zixing, the Dragon Hand, managed to escape amidst the chaos. On the other hand, Silver Spear Songgang and the others were killed by Lung Feng in the forest. The noisy official road quickly regained its tranquility. Tiger's Mane and the others even got some water to do a simple cleaning. From afar, it looked as if nothing had happened. But in reality, a dark cloud was looming over the capital. Yen Tao was on duty today, but even so he was distracted. Even when some of his subordinates came to report on their work, he did not know what they said. Finally, it was time for dinner, and he could finally take a break. He changed into an ordinary cloth robe and walked out of the Ministry of Justice's yamen. Just as he left the street and was about to go to the Yu residence to ask for clarification, his intuition told him that he was being followed. As one of the 4 chief detectives of the Ministry of Justice, Yen Tao's thoughts were extremely meticulous. He was also a martial arts expert and had done this kind of work countless times. Now that someone was suddenly following him, how could he not notice it? Being suddenly followed was not the first time something like this had happened. He had handled countless cases, and he had offended many people. But today, on such a sensitive day, someone was following him. This seemed to have a different meaning than usual. After thinking about it for an entire day, there was still no news from UNB. Could it be that he had forgotten about it after his great victory? But that shouldn't be the case. If something really happened to the Duke of Loyalty, it would definitely cause a commotion in the capital. There was no reason for him not to know. Could it be that UNB had failed, and not only that, he had also sold him out? Yen Tao had never held much hope for the so-called young master of an aristocratic family. These people were like insects, growing up under the shadow of their family. They did not know the pain of a small figure, and they did not know the difficulties of life. It was because all they saw was wealth, stability, and even luxury. Once they were faced with a bad environment, the psychological gap would be even greater. With such a mentality, it was hard to guarantee that they would not say anything. His mind was quickly thinking about the possibilities. If that was the case, then the person who sent the person should be the Duke of Loyalty's subordinate. He could not help but feel a chill in his heart, but his footsteps did not stop at all. He continued to walk toward his original destination, the Yu Mansion. Whether the person was sent by Yang Qindong or not, this trip to the Yu Mansion had to be made. At least, he had to inquire about UNB's whereabouts. If he was safe at home, then he would be safe. On the other hand, if something happened to him, then the identity of the person behind him would be revealed. With this thought in mind, Yen Tao walked forward as if he hadn't noticed anything. After a few streets, he came to the side door of the Yu Mansion. There were servants guarding there. Naturally, they were already familiar with the chief of detectives and opened the door to let him in. The tail behind him stopped at this point. However, he did not leave. Instead, he continued to stare at the door, waiting for Yen Tao to come out. Then, when the sky was dark, he would naturally take action to subdue the other party when there was a suitable opportunity. In the Yu Mansion, the lights in the main hall were on. When Yen Tao arrived, he saw the gloomy face of the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. "Greetings, Minister." Yen Tao entered the door and knelt on one knee. "Get up. What's the situation? Why hasn't UNB returned home yet?" As soon as Yu Shiyue spoke, Yen Tao had an extremely bad feeling in his heart. Yang Village. In the basement, UNB was simply treated and tied to a wooden frame. Opposite him, Yang Qindong sat on a wooden chair and looked up at this person with interest. He admired this young man who had the courage to kill him, but at the same time, he wanted to scold him for his stupidity. If he was so easy to kill, the first person to do it would have been Zhu Qiyu, the acting grandmaster. How could anyone else have a chance? The wound was simply treated and the bullet was taken out. When the bullet was placed on the copper plate, a crisp tinkling sound rang out. Yunbi's entire body involuntarily trembled. This also made his divine sense seem to have sobered up a lot at this moment. How is it? Is it very painful? Sai, life is like this. There is always some pain to let a person see the truth more clearly. Just like what you did today, it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. I really don't know what you were thinking. Did you think that you could kill me just because you brought some light cavalry and some crossbows? People always have to pay the price for their actions. Now that you've been captured, your life is in my hands. Can you say something? Perhaps I'll even consider giving you a quick death. How about it? Yang Qindong spoke unhurriedly, as if he was criticizing the other party. He was also amazed by the other party's actions, or perhaps he was calling him stupid. However, it wasn't until the last sentence that his true intention was revealed. However, after this sentence, one could see that Yunbi's expression had clearly become much uglier. If he said that he would give him a quick death, wouldn't that mean that he would die regardless of whether he said it or not? Of course, he didn't want to die. He had a grandfather who was a minister and was now a sixth-rank official in the imperial court. He was also young and could be said to have a bright future. How could he die? He didn't know what kind of darkness he would experience after death. Everything he had now would end and he would lose it all. At this moment, he didn't know whether it was because of fear or because it aroused his heroic spirit. He suddenly changed his weak appearance and shouted loudly, "No! You can't kill me. My grandfather won't let you go if he knows. I'm an official of the imperial court. If you kill me, you'll offend the law. Even the emperor won't tolerate it. Let me go, let me go. Otherwise, I'll flatten your Yang village and kill everyone in your Yang family." Yunbi was still shouting hysterically, roaring threats several times. Yang Qindong could no longer hear all of this. After turning around and leaving the basement, he said to Yang Lu, who was guarding here, "Send someone to accompany him. There's no need to torture him. Just don't let him sleep. When he's sleepy, splash him with cold water. He'll talk." The exhaustive interrogation method had long been proven to be one of the most useful interrogation methods in later generations. However, because the process was too inhumane, it had been banned for many years. However, it was now the great Ming dynasty, so naturally no one would pursue this matter. After handing over the matter to Yang Lu, Yang Qindong returned to the inner courtyard. He was greeted by his wife, Huyen, second Madame Qiao Yin, and seventh sister Yang Duo, who were in the village. There was a trace of kindness and anxiety in their eyes, but in the end Huyen asked, "What happened?" "I saw tigers, Mane, and Beta, Persei kneeling at the gate." Chapter 325. It's fine. Yang Qindong showed an extremely bright and clean smile. It's just a small matter. They willingly accepted the punishment. By the way, what delicious food did you make today? Ask someone to bring it out. Lu Lang will have dinner with you in a while. Knowing that Yang Qindong intended to send them away, Huyen and the other two girls still wanted to say something. But considering that the man had to do great things, they all obediently nodded and followed Huyen to the kitchen. When Qiao Yin walked past Yang Qindong, she said in a mosquito-like voice, "Don't be too harsh." Yang Qindong could not help but smile. Among the girls, only Qiao Yin had trained with him in cold front before, so she naturally knew his methods. For this reason, it was normal to have such worries. It was just that Beta Persei's performance today was really disappointing. If they had not received the news in advance and made some preparations, it was hard to say what the result would have been. Learning from the mistakes of others, there were some problems that needed to be properly discussed. At the gate in front of the inner courtyard, there were several rows of people kneeling in neat rows. This might be the benefit of strict training. Even when they were kneeling, they were so neat that no one could find any fault with it. The runners were led by Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. Behind them were the First Guard team's Captain Chiu Vi, the Wolfang team's Captain Tai Hu, and the Ghost Sniper team's Captain Baizhua. The third row was the team members under these people, the elites of Cold Front. These people were all members of Cold Front who participated in today's operation. Although time was a little short, they were prepared. However, some people still managed to escape. For this matter, without waiting for Yang Qindong to say anything, Tiger's Mane and the others took the initiative to kneel here and beg for forgiveness. When Yang Qindong walked out of the gate, Tiger's Mane and the others raised their heads, but when they saw Dong Shuai's expression, they quickly lowered their heads. Many of these people were personally taught by Yang Qindong, and some were trained according to his principles. They could all be considered as his students. As a teacher, he usually tried his best to maintain a friendly side. However, no matter what he did, due to the difference in status, there was always a gap between Yang Qindong and the rest. Perhaps this gap wasn't that big. In fact, it was very small. However, the gap still existed. No one dared to ignore this point, and no one dared to deny it. Now, Yang Qindong's expression was only slightly unpleasant, but Tiger's Mane and the others were so frightened that they lowered their heads like children who had done something wrong, waiting for the adults to punish them. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. For more than 10 breaths of time, Yang Qindong didn't say a word. A tense atmosphere unknowingly filled the space. This kind of silence was often the calm before the storm, the prelude to the arrival of the storm. "You all disappoint me." Finally, after a short period of silence, Yang Qindong spoke. When he opened his mouth to speak, a wave of pressure surged into everyone's body. That kind of feeling was like being pressed down by a 10,000-kilogram rock, giving birth to a feeling of suffocation. I was wrong to wait. Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others bowed their heads and admitted their mistakes shortly after Yang Qindong's words, as if they had turned over a new leaf. Wrong? Are you really wrong? All right, Beta Persei, let me ask you, where did you go wrong? Yang Qindong's voice seemed to be very casual, but the anger in his voice was getting stronger. Beta Persei, who was called out, was stunned at first. He was tall and extremely skilled. He was one of Yang Qindong's most trusted guards and was often brought along to protect him. In the Yang family system, anyone who saw him would be very respectful. However, this person also had a minor problem, which was that he didn't know how to speak. When he suddenly spoke, his voice was like thunder, which had frightened countless people. Because of this, he usually tried his best not to speak if he could. Yang Qindong asked him to say where he went wrong. This made Beta Persei very confused, but since it was the young master who asked, he certainly couldn't not answer. My mistake, clang. A kick suddenly came and kicked Beta Persei's strong body. The powerful force made him unable to stand steadily, and his body tilted to the side, almost falling to the ground. When he felt that the kick was from the young master, he tried to straighten his body, and his face was a little happier than before. Corporal punishment. It was the method that Yang Qindong used to train the first batch of Lung Feng. At that time, they were still in the Yang family manor in Jianing, and it was already 2 years ago. It was also because of the corporal punishment along the way that these uncultured, boorish men learned their lesson and finally grew up. He still remembered that at that time when anyone was kicked or punched by the 6th young master, not only would they not feel pain, but they would also be very happy. This represented the 6th young master's love for them, because if he didn't even want to hit you, perhaps it represented a kind of disappointment. More than 2 years later, he was kicked by the 6th young master again. Beta Persei's eyes and heart were only filled with joy and excitement. You don't even know where you went wrong, and you keep saying that you were wrong? Have you really thought about it? After the kick, Yang Qindong's angry voice rang out. Yes, young master, I was wrong. Beta Persei didn't seem to understand the meaning of Yang Qindong's words and continued to express his sincerity and seriousness. Yes, you were wrong. Since you don't know where you went wrong today, the young master will tell you. But please remember, this is only the first time. If you make the same mistake again, then you and all the people who made the mistake will go back to Crimson City. Haven't you always wanted to go to the battlefield? There will be many opportunities there, and it should be suitable for you. Yang Qindong's voice was still a little high-pitched before, but when he talked about going back to Crimson City, his tone was much lower. Originally, Beta Persei was a little happy, thinking that after this kick, it would prove that the young master still cared about him, valued him, and trusted him. Look, now he was even helping to point out where he went wrong, wasn't he? But when he heard that they were arranged to go back to Crimson City because of one more mistake, his expression changed drastically, and his breathing became much heavier. He suddenly raised his head. Not only Beta Persei, Tiger's Mane, and the others also raised their heads, looking at Yang Qindong with fear and nervousness. Some of them wanted to go to the battlefield, wanted to gallop there, and wanted to kill the enemy to their heart's content. However, if he was chased away by the young master in order to fulfill his dream, then the meaning was completely different. When that time came, what would the other Lung Feng brothers think of them for making a mistake? If they couldn't even protect the young master, wouldn't it mean that they were incompetent? In the eyes of Lung Feng, what could be more important than protecting the young master? Everyone felt as if a heavy hammer had struck them at this moment, and their expressions became incomparably solemn. They finally felt that the young master didn't seem to be joking with them, but was serious. After thinking it through, everyone's expression became extremely serious. They didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless, and their ears pricked up at this moment, as if they were afraid of missing a single word. Report, Yang San is here. Just as the atmosphere in front of the courtyard became incomparably solemn, Yang Wu, who was in charge of the security of the periphery of Yang Village, came to the door of the inner courtyard. He acted as if he didn't see Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others kneeling on the ground, but his heart was beating like a drum, and he didn't know what had happened. Bring him here. Yang Qindong thought that the security bureau really needed to be taught a lesson. They didn't even get any information about this incident, and this alone made them unqualified. After getting permission, Yang San quickly came to the gate of the inner courtyard. When he saw Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others kneeling, there was a trace of surprise on his face, but soon he also knelt on the ground, lowered his head, and said, "Your subordinate is incompetent, Yen Tao escaped." Escaped? Ha 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 ha, not bad, not bad. Yang San's appearance made Yang Qindong laugh incessantly, and the atmosphere seemed to become even more tense at this moment. Yang San came this time with the intention of being criticized, but he didn't expect Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei to be kneeling there. At this moment, he naturally knelt with them and lowered his head. There was one more person in the line. No, there were two more people, and Yang Wu also knelt in the first row. Although he still didn't know what had happened, he thought that not everyone could hear the young master's lesson. The kneeling crowd seemed to have grown a little, but it was quieter than before, which made Yang Qindong's voice even more deafening at this moment. Let's talk about Beta Persei first. You're very good at fighting, aren't you? You clearly know that the people who came are all from the underworld and have learned pure martial arts since young. When you fought with them, you didn't use your killing move right away, but instead countered their moves. You fought with them for a full 30 rounds, but you didn't kill a single person. You only injured Silver Spear Songgang. Where do you think the other comrades on the battlefield are? Is this your one-man show? Or do you think that this is a martial arts arena, where friendship comes first and competition comes second? You should know that if it weren't for the fact that the other comrades fought with all their strength and 4 of our brothers were injured, the battle line would have collapsed. At that time, even if you learned some things in the process of fighting, it was indeed equivalent to stepping on the corpses of other comrades. Do you feel guilty? Iron Tiger, as the captain of the Wolf-Fong Special Forces, you didn't kill them immediately in the dense forest. Instead, you played a game of cat and mouse. In the end, more than a dozen of your opponents escaped. Let me ask you, is it fun to be a cat? Is it fun to watch your opponents have a mental breakdown? So much so that you don't even care if your opponents escape? Do you remember that the young master said that being kind to your opponents is being cruel to yourself? Do you know that in the future, because of those who escaped, it is very likely that our comrades will be harmed by them? And all of this is caused by your momentary playfulness? If you really like this kind of game so much, there are still many mice in the Yang family village. You can catch them all like a cat. Chapter 326. Bai Zhua. As the king of sniping, you and the entire Ghost Sniper Squad are responsible for long-range attacks. It was killing people invisibly, killing people from 1,000 meters away. But what did you do? Other than killing some opponents in the first and second rounds, you actually gave up on your best spear technique and changed to bayonets to charge at the opponents just to test your close-range abilities. Not only did you escape from the opponents, but you also injured 2 of your brothers. Whose fault is this? Yang-san, I've told you before that intelligence work is very important and even plays an important role in the overall situation. You are everyone's clairvoyant eyes and ears. But what did you do? Other than the loopholes in your intelligence, you even lost information about a person. Do you know how much the Security Bureau has invested in you compared to other comrades in terms of money, reputation, and other aspects? You can't get enough returns from your generous investment. If that's the case and you still can't do a good job, then you can only be replaced. You can go back to Crimson City and join the Public Security Bureau. There seems to be a criminal police captain there, so you are suitable. There's also Tiger's Mane. According to the previous plan, after you and Chiovi appeared, you would charge at the enemy's rear like a gust of wind sweeping the fallen leaves. After that, you would charge at the enemy on horseback and use the advantage of your warhorse to wipe out all the enemies in one fell swoop. But what did you do? All of you stood in front of me and scared the enemies away. What's the use of standing in front of young master? To be a door god? If that's the case, Crimson City's gate will lack 2 suitable gatekeepers. You guys can fill this gap. In a short while, Yang Qindong said a lot. Almost all of the people kneeling here were mentioned. Even Yang Wu, who came later, was reprimanded. He said that recently the cold vanguard outside Yang Village had become more and more lazy. In the past, they were required to be alerted if there was an enemy within 10 miles. But now, they only noticed when the enemy was 5 miles away. Passive defense would never be as effective as taking the initiative to attack, and it would be more proactive. After a round of scolding, he pointed out some of the shortcomings that were gradually revealed. For example, arrogance, self-righteousness, disobedience, adventurous, lack of consideration for the overall situation, selfishness, disregard for the safety of their comrades, and so on. This was not a sudden thought. After living peacefully in the Yang family village for so long, everyone's spirit had indeed become lazy. They thought that they had the strongest weapon in the world and had gone through strict training, so they were truly invincible. But he really didn't know that arrogance could easily lead to death. He really didn't know that arrogance made people fall behind, and falling behind meant being beaten. Taking advantage of today's opportunity, Yang Qindong taught everyone a lesson. If the tree is not repaired, it will not be straight. If the person is not repaired, he will be valiant. No matter how strong a person was, if they were arrogant to the point of looking down on everything, then they wouldn't be far from being defeated. From today onwards, start criticizing others and yourself. Everyone was required to participate, and before they completely recognized their mistakes, their daily training sessions would be doubled, and those who did not achieve excellent results would have their meals reduced by half. For the third time in a row, his results were still the worst. Thus, he left the Yang clan manor and returned to Crimson City. His original honor as the Cold Front was revoked, and he was promoted to a civil servant. The rest of the people will return to their normal training state when they recognize their own shortcomings and pass the approval of their comrades. After dropping these words coldly, Yang Qindong turned around and walked into the inner courtyard. Just as he was leaving, he waved his hand and called Tiger's man and the deputy director of the security bureau, Yang San. Criticism and self-criticism were the class meetings in the modern army. During training, even if they were busy, they had to take time out every day to have a small meeting. Often, it would be based on the class as a unit. The squad leader would first self-criticize and criticize others, then the squad leader, and so on for every soldier. This practice could make people more aware of their own shortcomings and also better understand their comrades around them. They could constantly improve from pointing out the shortcomings, and it could also increase the friendship between comrades. It had been proven that this was a very good way to train soldiers. Yang Qindong didn't use it before because he was afraid that it would be too much of a blow to everyone's fighting spirit. But through today's matter, it was indeed necessary to do so. Even with such advanced weapons, they had still let more than 10 enemies escape. This was enough to prove that the deciding factor of victory was not the advanced weapons, but the fighting spirit and the hearts of the people. It was believed that through criticism and self-criticism, everyone would have a string in their minds that would lower the chances of them making a mistake to the lowest. They would be able to make Cold Front stronger and faster. Yang Qindong walked at the front until he reached the garden in the inner courtyard. Tiger's man and Yang Sen followed carefully behind him. They weren't afraid of the harsh training, nor were they afraid of the mountains of swords and seas of fire, but they were afraid of being sent back to Crimson City. For old people like them, they were the most outstanding and powerful existences in Lung Feng's eyes, and were even idols in the eyes of some people. If they were really sent back to Crimson City, then it would be a failure in life. No one would look up to them anymore, and there would be no hope for them in life. The work of the Security Bureau needs to be improved, and the people under us also need to undergo more systematic and hard training. Tiger's man also needs to be improved. As a new member, he must achieve excellent results. If he can't, then he will be sent back to Crimson City. This isn't a joke. Sometimes one wrong step can affect everyone, and all the previous efforts will be wasted. Do you understand? When Yang Qindong's words were heard by Tiger's man and Yang San, the two of them nodded solemnly. They knew that this time the young master was really expressing his dissatisfaction with the Security Bureau. If a similar situation were to occur in the future, their positions would probably be shifted. It was even possible that they would be sent back to Crimson City in accordance with military law. Knowing the seriousness of the matter, whether it was Tiger's man or Yang San, they both secretly made up their minds. The Security Bureau had to be changed or it would be destroyed. The seriousness of the two could be seen from their eyes. Yang Qindong knew the principle of too much and did not mention the issue of rectification. Instead, he asked, "Tell me, where did Yen Tao go? Where did you lose him?" When it came to serious matters, Yang San's resolute voice sounded. "Our people went to wait outside the Ministry of Justice's yamen and saw Yen Tao go to Yushiyue's residence. After that, there was no news. Could it be that he spent the night there?" Tiger's man asked with a doubtful face. After all, it was only a short period of time, so it couldn't be said that they lost him. Impossible, because after that, the people we sent to follow him found Yen Tao. Speaking of which, the other party was too careless. He didn't know our standards of conduct and followed us in pairs. It was also because of the timely warning that Yen Tao felt that things were not going well. He didn't do anything to our people and hurriedly withdrew. When the subordinates came back to report, I was afraid that Yen Tao was going to escape, so I came to report to young master to see if we should dispatch the Wolf Fang special forces to capture this person. Yang San's tone was very respectful as he asked for instructions. After silently listening to this, Yang Qindong gently shook his head. Yen Tao was just a small fry who could not arouse his interest at all. On the other hand, Yu Shiyue, the Minister of Justice, had provoked him time and time again. This time, he even tried to assassinate him. If it wasn't for the effect of the chess piece called Tang Tong arranged in advance, he was afraid that he would have suffered a loss this time. And this repeated provocation was really intolerable. Get ready. There is no need for the Yu residents to exist. He just said faintly as if talking to himself. But in the ears of Tiger's Mane and Yang San, they clearly knew what this meant. It might be a bit too much to say that it was pulling a tooth from the tiger's mouth, but in this way it was tantamount to starting a war with the scholar group. Yu Shiyue was nothing, but he was after all a second-rank official in the imperial court. If he was defeated, it was unknown whether the other officials and scholars would have the thought of a fox mourning for the death of a rabbit and a heart of hatred for a common enemy. Although Yang Qindong's power had been rapidly developing in Qiqian City, the speed was fast enough to make anyone in the know speechless. But in the capital, he had always been very careful. Sometimes he looked arrogant, but when there was really a big matter, he would be calm and avoid confrontation with the entire noble family and the landowning class group. But this time, Yang Qindong finally decided to make a move. Maybe he was annoyed by the little guy jumping up and down, maybe he was annoyed and wanted to end it once and for all, or maybe he wanted to kill the chicken to warn the monkey. In short, this time he was going to make a move. Since he decided to make a move, what would happen next seemed to be predictable. During this period of time, the Security Bureau had not been idle. They had prepared a lot of things, enough to defeat Yu Shiyue. But after the defeat, what kind of situation would there be, whether the so-called scholar group would fight back, to what extent, and whether they would really fight back, no one knew. But in any case, the will of the young master was the will of the entire Yangtze new army. His order was like the imperial edict of the great Ming emperor, unimpeded in Yangtze. The wind was coming. Yen Tao changed into an extremely ordinary set of clothes and left Cheng Shun in with some soft things. He had been exposed. No matter how he was found, one thing was clear, that if he did not leave, the Duke of Loyalty would not spare him. Although he was one of the chief detectives of the Ministry of Justice, in the eyes of ordinary people he was already a superior existence, or someone who could not be provoked. But in the eyes of a big shot like Yang Qindong, he was not even a fart. Once Yang Qindong made a move, he might lose his life here before even seeing the person. This was definitely not what Yen Tao wanted. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.